In the serene landscapes of Hawaii, James Holmes seeks solace, trying to escape the ruins of his shattered marriage. Once a successful businessman, his world crumbles when he uncovers his wife Caitlin's affair with his trusted partner Cyrus Black. Betrayed by those closest to him, James's heart turns cold as he navigates the treacherous waters of divorce. Caitlin's desperate pleas for forgiveness only deepen his resolve. Meanwhile, Cyrus, now on the run, leaves behind a trail of deceit that threatens to drag James further into darkness. As James contemplates a new beginning amidst the island's beauty, he's torn between letting go and seeking the ultimate revenge. Sitting on the beach under an umbrella was more relaxing than I thought it would be. My flight arrived just fine, and after I checked into my hotel, I went straight to the beach. That was yesterday. I settled into my cabin, had dinner, enjoyed a drink, and then went to sleep. This morning I had coffee, a light breakfast of pastries, and came back to the beach. My friends often shared pictures on Facebook of lounge chairs by the blue water and the white sand. I would look at those pictures and think that it looked amazing. Now that I was here, I realized those photos could never show how peaceful I felt. A warm breeze blew gently, and it was 83 degrees outside. I found a spot at a semi-private beach, so the other beachgoers were far away. I could see little dots of people in the distance, but they didn't bother me. The waves were small but steady, with occasional bigger ones that splashed high. The sound of the waves was delightful. The sand was clean and the water looked clear as glass. I could gaze at it for hours, with hardly any thoughts in my tired mind, except for the beauty in front of me. Behind me, I could see a few clouds and a beach hut surrounded by tall, proud palm trees and big rhododendron plants. These plants had pink, purple, white, and red flowers. Everywhere I looked, there was color. But like all good moments, this one had to end. As I sat enjoying the view, my phone beeped. It was a text from Maddie. "Love and miss you, Daddy. Please call me. Hope to see you soon. Love, Maddie." This sweet message brought tears to my eyes. I would do anything for my little girl, but I knew she wanted her family together again, and I couldn't give her that. I wanted it too, but we were so far from what we used to be. I quickly replied, "I love you too, sweetie. Just trying to relax. I'll call you tonight, I promise. Love you more." I had to remember the time difference since she lived on the East Coast and I lived in Hawaii, which was at least 6 or 7 hours ahead. I needed to check that with her message. My perfect beach day would have to wait. I got up and walked back to the cabin, feeling free for the first time in a long time. I had nothing to do. No one was counting on me, and I didn't have a job to rush to or urgent meetings to attend. It felt both amazing and a little strange. But I decided not to rush into looking for a job. I would take things easy, just like one of my favorite cartoon characters says, "Hakuna Matata." It means no worries. Once I heard someone say that in simpler words it means no worries. Thanks to Timon and Pumbaa for letting me borrow their saying. I chuckled to myself, recalling my little joke. I made a sandwich and a fruit cup with what I found in the fridge. It was the best vacation ever. However, it made me think about how he should be with Caitlin. Just thinking about it made me feel sad. I had kept that thought away from my mind for almost a whole day, but now it was crashing back in. Before my day got worse, I decided to check the liquor cabinet. It was full, too. If you are in a lovely place, you should enjoy what's around you. Maybe I should create a saying like that. It could be on a nice postcard. Anyway, I found what I needed and took out a bottle. I poured a shot or two into a big cup, added some juice from an unlabeled bottle, and stirred. The drink probably smelled like pineapple, but whatever it was, it tasted great. I should ask what kind of juice it was so I could buy some later. I put a straw in my glass, grabbed my lunch, and strolled back down the beach to sit in my lounge chair. I raised my glass to the bright blue sky, remembering my marriage. I set it down and took a long sip. The sky didn't reply, but I felt like it understood me. Maybe I was losing my calm bit by bit, but I figured it would be fine. I ate my lunch slowly. After I finished, I decided it was time to be productive for a little while. I needed to make some calls to sort out my loose ends. I needed to call Sandra and Tony to handle any legal issues back home. Also, I had to figure out where to live. Time for the first call. I hoped Tony was still in the office. I dialed, and it rang 3 times before he picked up. "Tony here. Is this you, James?" he said. "Yes, it's me. Any news on my situation? I asked. To some degree, yes. I filed a motion with the court to revoke his partner status. The judge has put it on hold for now because Cyrus has only been charged, not convicted. Plus, the feds want all business records because of Cyrus and his other job. He continued, the good news is Cyrus missed his bail hearing today, which helps your case. I'm still interested in that guy on the West Coast. Once this whole Cyrus situation is settled, you should get the letter we discussed with the power of attorney. Okay, I'll send it to you as soon as I receive it. Keep me updated about the sale and Cyrus, I said. We quickly hung up, skipping any long goodbyes. So the fool skipped out on his hearing. What's next? Is he planning to rob a bank? How did I not see all his flaws before getting involved with him? They were always there, but I somehow didn't notice them. Another lesson learned, I suppose. After another sip, the drink started to taste nice. Just as I was about to make another call, my phone buzzed. The caller ID showed Kurt Simpson's name. I wondered what he needed. Hello, this is James. Mr. Holmes, this is Kurt Simpson. We were keeping an eye on your wife's house last night, and I have something important to tell you. Go on, I replied, curious. I was sitting 2 houses down when a dark silver BMW pulled into your driveway around 9 p.m. I took some pictures, and I can tell you it was your partner, Cyrus Black. He went to the door, and they let him in without any trouble. I couldn't hear what they talked about. He paused, waiting for my reaction. I didn't know what to say. All I could think was that the jerk was back for more. How long had this been happening? How didn't I notice? I thought we were happy, but this explained a lot about my wife's behavior lately. Carry on, I said, feeling a calmness that only comes after a good run. I watched all night. He left around 7 o'clock in the morning. I followed him for a bit and saw him go to a small motel about 2 miles away. I left after he went inside. Thanks, Kurt. You've helped me more than you realize, but I want to ask. Did you get pictures or evidence from last night? My lawyer might need it. Also, make sure to give his location to the police. I heard he's out on bail and they're looking for him. I smirked. He must be foolish not to hide better. That's good for him. Yeah, I got some pictures. I didn't think you'd want to see them, but I got a clear shot through the window of them together. I'll send those to your lawyer. As for telling the police about him, I already did that. There's one more thing. We looked into what the ATF found. It turns out Cyrus was working with someone named Christopher Hood, a government employee. The feds are keeping quiet about this, but it seems like this is another dishonest politician. Did the guy at FEMA work with Cyrus too? The plot is thickening. I could run into Alice at any moment. Wow, thanks for the update, Kurt. I'm shocked. You're welcome, James. I'm really sorry to tell you this. I hate it when good people get treated badly. It's one of the reasons I do my job. I try to bring a bit of justice into people's lives. Thank you, I said as we ended the call. This was frustrating, but it started to make sense. Cyrus wasn't just trying to come between me and my wife. He wanted me out of the way so he could take my place. I doubted I could ever trust anyone again. I took a deep breath, looked at my nearly empty drink, and decided it was time to mix another one. As I walked back to the cabin, a troubling idea came to me. What will I do now? Where will I live? I didn't want to see her again, so going back to Virginia was not an option. Where else could I go? Then it struck me. Why not stay here? Not at this resort, but in Hawaii itself. This place was beautiful, and I figured it wasn't worth going back to Virginia, except for Maddie. She was away at college, but I thought she would understand. I still needed to make a few calls. Next, I called Sandra. She wasn't happy I called just before she was leaving. It was almost 6 p.m. on the East Coast. I'm sorry for calling so late, Sandra, but I'll be quick. I want a divorce, but I also want to change things because of her cheating. I want her to feel the hurt, and I don't want to pay her a lot of money if I can help it. I think I surprised her because there was a pause before she responded. Are you sure about this, James? Very. I just found out that her affair wasn't just a one-time thing. I won't listen to her lies anymore. Good. If Kurt has proof of her cheating, I can start the process tomorrow. I'll let you know the details after she gets the papers. I've already asked Kurt to send everything he has to you. You don't need to update me. Just text me when everything is ready. I don't need the details. Thanks, James. I'm really sorry about all of this, but I'll do my best to help you fix it. With that, We both hung up. And just like that, my marriage started to fall apart. I felt sad. But then I remembered the saying, "No worries. I wouldn't let her ruin my life anymore." I finished my drink and made another one. I could get used to this. I put my plate in the sink and settled back in my chair. Now that the important call was over, I needed to focus on the next step for the day, finding a new place to live. That would be tricky since I wasn't from around here. Where in the world was I supposed to stay? Maybe I should ask the concierge. They know everything, right? I slipped on my sandals, took my drink with me, and walked down the path to the main building. As I opened the side doors, I was met with the cool air from the air conditioner. It felt nice and refreshing, but didn't stop me from heading towards where I needed to go. The concierge desk was on the left side, right across from the main entrance. She noticed me and turned with a bright smile. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you today?" she asked. I had to hold back my first thought, as I wasn't thinking clearly at that moment. She looked like a local with long, wavy hair and a beautiful figure that matched her flowing dress perfectly. I knew I had to look away if I wanted to talk to her. "Can you help me? I'm only here for a few days, but I really like it and want to stay longer. Do you know where I can find a place to sleep tonight? I know it's a strange request, but my life has changed recently, and this feels like a good place to start fresh." She paused for a moment, thinking about what I just told her. "I'm not a real estate agent," she said, "but I can tell you that living here is pretty expensive. Most homes in this area cost a lot. Still, I can give you the name of someone who can help." "Would that be okay?" I asked. "Sure," she replied. She opened a book on her desk, looked for something, and then wrote on a small piece of paper. She tore it off and handed it to me. "Here's the name of a woman I trust. Call her. Is there anything else I can do for you today?" "Actually, yes. What should I do for fun tonight? I thought about exploring the island, but I have no idea where to begin. And what's the name of that juice in my room?" Those questions seemed easier for her to answer. She talked about lots of great places for visitors to check out. Some started here at the resort, while others needed a taxi ride. She gave me several brochures and a handwritten note. I thanked her and turned to go back to my cabin. I thought I saw her give me a flirty look when I thanked her. Maybe I was just imagining it. As I looked through the brochures, I found a few that caught my eye. One was about a helicopter tour of the island, and another was about military museums nearby. I definitely wanted to visit the Arizona Memorial. I remembered watching the movie Pearl Harbor. There were a few other brochures I would look at later in my room. What stood out to me was the note, which said the name of the juice was Lily Craw Passion Fruit. I also noted the name Leah Mellon and a phone number. I wasn't ready to jump back into dating, but I felt good that she was interested in an older guy like me. I decided to keep that number for later. I figured I had a few more calls to make today. My phone was buzzing more than ever. First, I called Leah, the real estate agent. I waited until I was back at my cabin. She answered with a cheerful, "Aloha, this is Leah." Her voice was lovely. Would all the women in Hawaii sound like this? I started to think I made a great choice coming here. "Hi, my name is James," I said, bringing myself back to the moment. "I want to find a place to live that's more lasting than just staying at this resort." Kim from the front desk gave me your number. "Can you help me out?" "Sure, I'd be happy to help. What are you looking for?" "I'm not really sure yet. I might need 2 bedrooms, but I haven't thought about it much. Do you have a preferred location? I just want somewhere near the ocean." She laughed a little at my joke, which I knew was cheesy. "But seriously, I'm open to any area. I'd like somewhere quiet, but not too far from everything else." I heard some rustling on the other end. "I'll put together a list of possible places, and we can meet to see some of them. How does that sound?" "Sounds great. Thanks a lot. I'll call you tomorrow." "Aloha." She ended the call in a friendly way. I knew I would really enjoy my time here. There was one more call to make. I promised to call my daughter, and I always keep my promises. I made another drink, which I jokingly called my beach pineapple, and walked back to my beach chair. I sat down and took out my phone. I looked at her contact picture and noticed how much she looks like her mother. I really hoped she didn't get her mother's wild side. The phone rang a few times and then went to voicemail. I listened to her cheerful voice asking me to leave a message and she would call me back. I was halfway through a quick message when my phone buzzed with an incoming call. She was calling me back. How odd that this doesn't happen more often, I thought. I answered the call and skipped leaving a voicemail. "Hi, honey. I'm glad you called back so fast. I didn't even get to leave a message," I said with a smile. "Hi, Dad. Yeah, we've been a bit busy. Sorry." I could almost sense her embarrassment through the phone. When she said we, I wondered if she was with her girlfriend or her mother. I didn't want to ask about that, so I dropped it. "Oh, that's fine. I just wanted to check in and let you know that I'm doing well. This place is really amazing. I hope you can come visit me." "Visit?" There was a pause, and I realized I had made a mistake. "Dad, what do you mean?" "Oh no, I need to get better at talking. Honey, I've decided to move here for good. I haven't found a place yet, but I'll start looking tomorrow." "What? You can't move that far away. I'll never see you again." She seemed like she might start crying. "Maddie, you can always come visit me and we'll figure it out. I might still be able to visit you sometimes, you know? I'm sorry, but I have to do this. Dad, I know Mom made mistakes, but do you really have to move so far away?" I had been worried about this conversation, and now it was happening. I didn't want to upset my daughter, but I felt it was time for a change. I knew I couldn't do that while staying in Virginia. I took my time thinking about how to respond. "Dad, are you leaving Mom? Oh my gosh, are you getting a divorce?" she asked. I could hear her crying through the phone, and it made my heart ache. I hated to see her so sad. I had to find a way to comfort her. "Maddie, what I said before is still true. I will always care for your mom, but I can't trust her again. As for you, I will always do my best to support you. I really want you to come and visit me. Bring your friend along, too. I'd love to meet her and see you both." She laughed a little. "Now you're trying to buy my happiness. Who, me? Never!" I knew she was joking back, and it felt good to hear her laugh. I thought I heard another girl giggle in the background. "All right, you win. It's summer break, so we have time. Just send me the tickets and we'll come. Oh, and for your information, her name is Sarah Jones." I had to pull the phone away from my ear when I heard two excited voices cheering on the other end. "Wow! We're going to Hawaii!" Once the excitement quieted down, we said our goodbyes. I had a lot to think about, but I wanted to show her that I loved her. After the call, I leaned back in my chair and finished my drink. It was still only the afternoon here, but it was getting late back home. I felt a little tired from traveling, but not ready for bed yet. I got up and went back inside to look through some travel brochures again. One brochure caught my eye about a helicopter tour. There was another on snorkeling, which sounded fun, but I wasn't ready for that much activity just yet. I found the military museum page again and placed it on top of the stack. There was also a bus tour of the city that looked interesting, perfect for my laid-back mood. After checking a few more options, I chose the bus tour. It sounded fun and easy. I called the front desk, and Kim was really helpful in arranging everything. She was friendly, but could also get me into trouble during my stay. After locking up the cabin, I made my way to the front desk. The bus was waiting, so I hopped on and we were off. The tour lasted 2 hours, taking us all around the city. I noticed many cute shops and restaurants I wanted to try. I noted one called Island Gyms, which seemed just right for dinner tonight, even though it looked small and tucked away among the other buildings. I could almost picture it being a place featured on one of my favorite cooking shows. You know, the one with the host who has wild hair. I was dropped off at a resort and changed into fresh clothes to go to dinner. I took a cab and found a seat at the bar. The staff was very friendly and the food was great. I tried some local tuna cooked with a fruit I couldn't even pronounce. While I enjoyed my meal, I watched the people around me. There was a group of 4 muscular guys near the door. They were laughing and drinking, clearly having finished eating a while ago. At another table, I saw 3 women enjoying different fish dishes. Next to the door, a couple was sitting close, holding hands and sipping wine. Further down the bar, an older man seemed happy talking to the young woman behind the bar. Even someone older like him seemed to have a chance here in Hawaii. I waved to the bartender for another beer, and just then a guy at the end of the bar got off his stool and came over. He sat down next to me and extended his hand. "Howard Denton," he said. I introduced myself as James Holmes. "So, what brings you to this beautiful spot?" he asked. That question made me feel a bit uneasy. Still, I wanted to see how he'd react. Actually, my business partner tried to ruin my life. He also made my wife think I was cheating on her, but I wasn't. She had been cheating with him for who knows how long, all just days before our wedding anniversary. To my surprise, He started laughing. I hadn't expected that. But something about his laughter felt healing. His laughter was so infectious that I couldn't help but join in. "This is the wildest story I've ever heard. What about you?" he asked. "My wife left me 3 years ago for a much younger guy. Too bad he didn't have any money and she didn't get the big fortune she thought she would." He laughed even harder, patting me on the back. "James, you're making my day. Let me buy you a drink." Who could argue with free drinks and a fun conversation? We moved to a table and continued chatting about our past relationships. He seemed in a good mood, and I felt a bit jealous since my wounds were still fresh. At least the drink was helping me feel better. When the bartender told us it was last call, I stood and reached out my hand. "It was a pleasure to meet you," I said softly, hoping he understood. "Come here," he said, pulling me into a friendly hug. "You're a fun person to be around. You were really easy to talk to." We both sounded equally drunk, laughing and holding on to each other as we walked out the door. The bartender called after us, asking if we needed a taxi. Howard waved and shouted no. It was one of the strangest days of my life, and it was ending with a lot of drinks. Howard and I strolled slowly down the street. He turned us toward the marina. I felt a little worried he might do something bad, but I was too tipsy to think clearly. We walked down the pier to a big yacht. It had maybe 3 levels above the water, and the top level had an extra steering wheel. The boat also had lots of small windows, making it feel cozy. "Welcome to my home," he said with a wave toward the boat. "Want to come on board?" he hiccuped. I didn't have anywhere else to go, so I nodded. That nod was a bad idea because everything started to spin. I grabbed the edge of the boat to steady myself and climbed aboard. Inside was a big living room with a comfy chair, which I sank into. Howard pulled out a bottle with no label and poured a dark drink into 2 glasses. He handed one to me. I barely remember finishing our drinks or what we talked about. The next thing I knew, I was awake to the sound of seagulls and the gentle rocking of the boat. I was still in that soft chair, and I remembered drinking something delicious. My head was spinning and my mouth felt so dry. I stood up, took a deep breath, and walked over to the small fridge next to the couch. I grabbed a bottle of water and drank half of it. I really needed to drink less. Everyone says that when they have a hangover. Looking around the marina, I noticed many boats. Some were as big as Howard's, but most were smaller. The sun was setting behind distant mountains, and the cool breeze felt nice, even with my pounding headache. It was a beautiful sight. I heard some noise coming from the stairs leading below deck, and I guessed Howard was waking up in the same messy way I was. Or maybe worse. He stumbled up and said some words I couldn't catch. He dropped onto the couch, lifted his head, and started laughing. "Wow, what a night," he said, looking right at me. I agreed, but added, "I really need some coffee and pain relief." He nodded and went to a cabinet, pulling out a bottle. He tossed it to me and then moved to another tall cabinet across the room. He opened the door and I saw a coffee pot cleverly hidden behind it. I opened the pill bottle and shook out 4 pills while he made the coffee. I took the pills with some water and settled into a chair. I overslept. "Do you have any plans for today?" he asked. "Actually, yes. I need to finish some things in Virginia and find a place to live here. For now, I'm staying at the White Sands Resort." Howard hummed and sat on the couch to wait for his coffee. "If you need any help or have some free time, give me a call," he said. He pulled a business card from his shirt pocket and handed it to me. A few questions popped into my mind. Why did he have his cards in his pocket? How was he still able to do that after all the drinking last night? And what did he want from me besides a drinking buddy? "Sure," I replied. I wasn't in the mood for a long talk. He gave me a mug of coffee and took one for himself. We sat quietly, sipping our drinks and enjoying the peaceful harbor. After a bit, he looked at me and asked, "So, what's your next step? You mentioned you were selling your business last night." I didn't remember talking about that. Maybe I was really drunk and forgot. "Honestly, I'm not sure yet. I know I want to move here, but I'm still thinking about it. If I could, I would love to fly." He nodded, deep in thought. "Okay, if you need anything while you figure things out, just let me know." I thanked him and stepped off the boat. I took a cab back to the resort and went straight to my cabin, collapsing on the bed. My sleep was great until my phone rang again. "Hello?" I answered, snuggling deeper into my pillow. "Mr. Holmes, I'm calling to see if we are going house hunting today." Oh no, I had totally forgotten. Yes, I'm a little late, but I can meet you in about 30 minutes. Is that okay? Sure, see you then. I rushed into the bathroom for a quick shower and put on clean clothes. Brushing my teeth fast, I dashed to the concierge desk. Tim was there again, looking as nice as ever. Hi, Kim. Can you help me? Your friend Leah is meeting me, and she told me to ask where she likes to get coffee. Yes, Mr. Holmes. She usually goes to a place called Kona Hut just 2 blocks away. It's a nice coffee shop. I thanked her and hurried out the front door, jumping into a cab to take me the short distance. These blocks were nothing like the neighborhoods back in Virginia. The resort was a good distance away from the nearest road, about 2 miles, and another 2 miles to the next one. I paid the taxi driver, and he drove off. As I walked into the building, a woman who seemed to be from the island approached me. She was beautiful, with dark skin and smooth black hair. She smiled warmly and waved, inviting me to sit at the table across from her. On the table, I saw at least 10 printouts of houses. I figured we were going to look at them. Hello, Mr. Holmes, I'm Leah, she said softly. Hi, and please call me James. Okay, James. Let's go through these and pick out the ones you really like. There's no need to look at houses that don't catch your eye. I picked these based on what we talked about yesterday. Sounds good to me. Looks like it's going to be a chill day again, I said with a grin. We sat down and looked over the 10 houses she had chosen for me. She explained the details and mentioned possible issues with some of them. I wasn't worried about doing some small repairs, but I didn't want to buy a bad house either. I chose 3 houses I wanted to visit in person, and we decided to meet at a coffee shop the next day, early enough to see the houses before lunch. After that, I returned to the resort and thought I could use a quick nap. I woke up a few hours later feeling a bit groggy from the drink, but better than before. I took a couple of pain relievers, drank some water, and headed out to the beach. I found a chair and sat there for a while, just relaxing and listening to the waves. Around 3 in the afternoon, my phone rang. James, it's Tony. I have an update on Cyrus. I'll send you a link to an article about it. I want to let you know he won't be a problem for you anymore. The agents are still checking your company records, but so far they haven't found any proof that he used a real business for illegal activities. The only thing they found was at his warehouse, where he intended to use planes to go to Mexico. Because of everything that has happened, the judge decided in your favor and allowed the partnership to end. The business is now 100% yours legally. Should I proceed with the West Coast plan once the agents finish their work? Yes, please. I was amazed. Things were moving quickly, and I never expected it to happen so fast. Honestly, I felt really excited about ending this last connection. I was sad too, as the business felt like a second child to me after Maddie, but I knew I had to let it go. Just thinking about it reminded me of Cyrus and how we started this together. Well, time to chill. I'll read that article later, probably after some drinks. Maybe a lot of drinks? Yes, thank you. Thanks again for everything, Tony. After hearing such great news, I felt excited again. I got up, went back to the main building, and had an early dinner at the restaurant there. I checked my phone and opened the link Tony had sent me about the news and Cyrus. There was a big picture of the motel. I thought it was the same one Kurt said Cyrus was hiding in. The photo showed several police cars from different groups, including a SWAT van. The article had a few details, but it mainly said that the FBI planned the raid with help from other agencies and local police. They had gotten an anonymous tip about the fugitive, Cyrus Black. The police believed he was armed and very dangerous. The raid found a lot of evidence, but they still hadn't caught him. It looked like he had learned how to run away like a criminal. I worried he might cause trouble later, but for now, he was out of sight with so many officers watching. I hoped he would stay away for a while. That night, I had a great sleep and woke up feeling good. I took one last look at the 3 houses we had picked and then went to meet Leah. She took me to all 3 houses, and honestly, they were all okay. I didn't feel a strong connection with any of them, at least not enough to buy. She took me to lunch, where she asked me a few questions and said she would keep searching for me. Leah took me to a nice resort and promised to stay in touch for the next few days. I didn't leave my lounge chair much. A couple of times, I got up and went to the gym to make sure I didn't gain weight from all the tasty food and drinks. After a few days on the lounge chair, I had a thought. While I was watching the birds and some boats pass by, I realized the answer was right in front of me. I called Leah and asked her to look for boats for sale that would fit the space I wanted. At first, she laughed, but then she saw I was serious and said she would help me. I knew boats weren't her main thing, but that was okay. It took another 2 days, but she came to the resort and joined me on the beach. She showed me several options, and I quickly found one I loved. Of course, I still wanted to see it in person, but I felt a strong connection right away. In the picture, there was a tall and proud wooden boat. The hull was all white with dark railings and trim. The plaque said the boat was 36 feet long, had 5 sleeping areas and 2 bathrooms, and it was made in 1972. I figured that sleeping areas meant bedrooms and bathrooms meant bathrooms. The boat had a new diesel engine and had recently cruised to Alaska and back. Her name was Lady of the Night, and she was offered at a price I liked. We took a personal tour of her, and wow, she was beautiful. Both the inside and outside had been well taken care of. It was clear that a lot of love went into taking care of this boat. I told Leah that I wanted her help to get the boat for me. All day I felt happy just thinking about the fun times I would have. Now, I just needed to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. It reminded me of the classic question, what do you want to be when you grow up? I knew for sure that flying was still my dream. Flying was my first love and my real passion. Unlike the woman I cared about, flying would never let me down. I also promised myself I would never work for the government again. I was done with that. That guy from FEMA thought you couldn't trust anyone, which really bothered me. Maybe I could do something on my own. I wondered if there were any charter flight services nearby. Perhaps I could fly to one of the small islands where a handful of people lived or where tourists went. It made me think of a movie with Harrison Ford, and it sounded like a fun idea. I'd ask Leah about it. She seemed to know everything and was always nice to talk to. But first, I had to finish some official work so I could get back to enjoying the beach. I imagined sipping pineapple drinks. Those drinks surprisingly never gave me a hangover, except when I was with Howard and had that dark stuff. I guess the juice was keeping me hydrated. Anyway, I went to the resort's main building and printed the power of attorney document that Tony had sent me. I read it over twice to make sure I wasn't giving him too much power. It looked exactly like I'd asked, giving him only the power to transfer assets and money related to selling my business. I filled out all the needed details and took it to the main desk. I wondered if she could notarize it, and she said she could. I signed the document, and she stamped it with a tool from her desk, then signed it too. Was there anything this woman couldn't do? She even arranged for the letter to be sent back to Tony in Virginia by priority mail. While she was preparing the envelope, I asked her about local charter flights. She told me there were a few options, but it depended on where I wanted to go. She gave me 2 brochures for flight services to some islands, and I thanked her. I decided I would look into how far and how often these flights ran. That night, I slept pretty well again. Over the next few days, time seemed to slip away. The sale would happen as soon as the federal investigation was finished. Cyrus was still on the run, and Caitlin was given the paperwork. She first called me and then sent me a text. I simply replied that she should talk to Sandra if she needed me. Had I been a coward for not talking to her directly? I probably told myself that she would do her best to change my mind about the divorce, and I didn't want to stay married to her anymore. Eventually, I knew I would have to speak with her, but I planned to delay it as long as I could. It was tough, but by cashing in most of my retirement savings, I bought a boat. I paid to keep it at a dock in Oahu and worked with locals to clean it up and get it ready for living. The biggest problem was my wife. She didn't want the divorce and thought she could convince me to stay. Luckily, she didn't push for counseling, but she believed she could prove her love to make things right after her betrayal. Through my lawyer, I told her to leave me alone and go to Cyrus if she wanted excitement. I know it was harsh, but I felt she had it coming. I eventually had to return to Virginia to wrap everything up. I spent as much time as possible with Maddie, promising her I would call or email often. I did have to see Caitlin once, and those 30 minutes were the hardest of my life. I know I made mistakes, but I want to spend my life making it up to you. I love you. I don't want this divorce, she begged. I asked, "What's in it for Cyrus, then? How long have you two been together? I know it wasn't just that one time I saw you." "I swear it was just once," she insisted. "As crazy as it sounds," she said, I wanted you to find out so you could feel the pain I felt when I thought you were unfaithful. I know it sounds foolish now. I'm sorry for what I did. If I could take it back, I would. And what about the nights after I left? Did he stay here? Just on the couch? I pressed. She turned pale and her eyes widened when she heard this. Yes, that's what happened, she said quietly. I looked at her, not believing it. You think I'm that foolish? I've been blind to this for a long time. I gave her a hard stare. He must have been really special if he was worth losing everything for. James, I'll do anything. Please don't leave me. It didn't mean anything, and I promise I won't do it again. Stop, I shouted. I've had enough. You pushed away the life we could have had together. You destroyed my belief in us. You killed my love for you just like he tried to ruin me. After that, she started crying. It was almost funny. If I hadn't been the one going through it, I wouldn't have believed it. How could such a great love end like this? They must have worked something out, or she must have been foolish to fall for him after all these years. I walked away, leaving her there. I told Maddie that we were done before I left town. I gave her some tickets to visit later in the summer. Caitlin wouldn't get what she wanted. We were going to be divorced, whether she liked it or not. While I was still in town, I spoke with both lawyers and visited Sean. I told him I was thinking about starting my own boat service in Hawaii and asked if he would help me. He said he would think about it, and I told him to take his time. After all that, I went back to Hawaii, which was now my home. The yacht was just right for me, and I loved the quiet of the ocean at night. Eventually, the investigation ended, and Tony was able to sell the business to Rapid Relief Logistics. I asked him to make sure the new owner took care of Jenny, Tammy, and Sean, who were good workers and didn't deserve to lose their jobs because of Cyrus. I didn't care if they found Cyrus. He had lost everything for my wife. I hoped he was enjoying his life on the run. When I got back, I started thinking about my boat service. I planned to focus on the smaller islands. There were already many services between the larger islands, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to compete with them yet. I needed to learn more about the area first. The only change I made after returning from Virginia was moving my boat from Oahu to Molokai Island. I thought it was a good central spot for starting my small island hopping service. It was also quieter, less crowded, and very beautiful. As soon as the sale was final, I would get started. In the meantime, I relaxed on my boat and enjoyed some fresh pineapple. Eventually, I realized I wanted some company, so I called Kim. I decided it would be nice to ask her out. She happily accepted my dinner invitation before I even got to fully ask. I took her to Halawa Joe's, a seafood place she had suggested. The outside of the restaurant didn't look like much, but the inside was nice. When we were seated on the back patio, I was amazed. We had a beautiful view of a small lake with a white dock stretching out into it. The colorful mountains around us and the thick greenery made the scene perfect. We sat down, and I thought it was time to learn more about each other. So far, I only knew she was smart and worked as a concierge. So, Kim, have you lived here your whole life? I asked. She nodded. Yes. My family is mostly from here, from Kaneohe, but my grandmother lives north of here. I've visited most of the islands, but I haven't gone further. Where are you from? I lived in Virginia until recently. I decided to sell my business and move here. As for the rest of my family, that's a long story for another time. Just know that I'm divorced, and I have a daughter I love dearly. It was time to change the topic, so I did. Right now, I live on Molokai, at least on the yacht I have there. I plan to start a charter flight service and keep flying, which is what I love to do. Her smile lit up the room. I could tell she was happy I moved here instead of just being a tourist. Dinner was served, and we enjoyed easy conversation while getting to know each other. She turned out to be very smart and so pretty that I found myself looking at her more than once. When we finished, I left the money for the bill and tip on the table, and we went outside. Overall, the dinner was refreshing. I hadn't been on a first date in forever, so it felt good to talk to a lovely woman without stumbling over my words. I drove her back to her apartment, and she invited me to join her for a drink. I hoped she would say yes so we could keep the fun going, and she did. That evening, we shared some special moments. The next morning, I woke up to find her side of the bed empty. She was already in the kitchen, sipping coffee that she had made. She looked serious and said, "We need to talk." My heart sank a little, as no one enjoys hearing that. James, I really like you. Last night was wonderful, and I hope it was for you too. Kim, it was amazing. You're a fantastic woman, and I had a great time last night, I said, smiling as I remembered it all. I just want you to know I'm not looking for anything serious right now, okay? There was an anxious look on her face as she waited for my response. I felt worried that she might want to jump too far too fast, like moving in together or something, but I felt relieved when I replied, Kim, I'm not looking for anything serious either. I really like you, and I'd love to see you more, but I'm not thinking about marriage or kids right now. I finished with a light-hearted chuckle. She smiled, seeming happy with my answer. Well, of course I want to keep dating you, you silly, she laughed. I told her I would call and come by to see her soon. I took a moment to pull myself together and kissed her goodbye, feeling giddy as I walked out the door. On my way back to my new home on Molokai, I felt like I was floating. When I got to my boat and settled in, I noticed something odd. The space next to mine was taken up by Howard's big boat. I strolled over and called out, "Ahoy!" After a minute, Howard peeked out a window to see who was there. When he saw me, he stepped out of the cabin and waved. "Come aboard, James. It's great to see you, my friend." I was curious why he was here, but it didn't matter much. He was my only friend around, and I thought he was a good one. We went into his room and sat down. I took the soft chair and he chose the couch. James, I like your choice of location. It's nice to settle here. Oahu was lovely, but this place feels peaceful. Thanks, Howard. I'm happy you like it. You might be wondering why I'm here. The thought had crossed my mind, and I replied with a grin. I mean, we both enjoy nice things, right? Ha ha! That's why I like you. I have an idea for you. I know you've just started looking for places to open a new charter service, and I want to help. There's a plane for sale. The pilot is retiring and needs some money for a move to the Midwest. I'm listening, I said, encouraging him to go on. I'm not sure about all the details, but he mentioned it's a 1957 Beaver. It's in great shape. I really want to help you because I have friends who want to come visit. They want to camp on one of the small deserted islands for a couple nights. If I can help you get that airplane, could you help me? I asked. I get guests like this sometimes, and it would be great to have a partner who could fly us when needed. I thought for a moment. I would need to register my business and get some cards, but starting with exclusive clients seemed possible. I looked at him, smiled, and said, "That sounds good to me. Of course, I need to handle the official stuff, register myself and the plane, and learn about the area." "When are your friends arriving?" "They're flying into Honolulu next week." He must have noticed my surprise, so he continued, "Sorry for the short notice, but I could really use a favor." "Okay, Howard, I can handle the paperwork tomorrow. Contact your guy and tell him I want to check out this plane. If it's a good one, I'll think about buying it. Now, how about we grab a drink and chat about something else?" He smiled. "Sounds great." So that's what we did. We enjoyed some drinks, and before I knew it, I fell asleep on the couch instead of going to my bunk. The next day was quite rough. Ugh, Howard in his gloomy room. I decided I would stick to my own drinks from now on. I was not only feeling the effects of a hangover, but also struggling with the slow process of dealing with government workers. They needed me to complete a lot of forms and show proof of my past experience and pilot's license. Luckily, I had my license, but all my flight records were still in Virginia. I decided to call Sean. We chatted for a bit. He told me about his new boss, and I shared my new plans with him. "Sean, would you like to work for me again? I can't promise a big salary, but I have an extra room on the yacht where you can stay. The location makes up for the lower pay for now," I said. He agreed, mentioning that his new boss wasn't terrible, but not great either. He told me that the new boss had already informed Jenny and Tammy that he didn't really need them anymore because he had his own team taking care of things. He mentioned that he only needed the planes, a mechanic to keep them running, and a few pilots. He had brought on 2 new pilots, 1 man and 1 woman who he didn't think highly of. "They act so important, it's hard to believe they can even breathe with their heads held so high," he joked. I chuckled at his words. "Talk to the girls and see if either of them wants to move here," I suggested. "I know Tammy has a husband and kids, so it might be hard for her, but Jenny is single, right?" "Yes, but I'll ask both of them. Tammy might consider moving since she just told me her husband has been behaving poorly while she's been working hard. He was at home having fun with the neighbor girl who is only 19. What a shame," he said. I agreed with him. Let me know what they say, I replied. I'm on Molokai now, and I found a plane I want to check out. I could use some help, and some familiar faces would be nice too. Also, can you send me my flight records from the office? I need them to register with the state. I'll get them to you right away. Just don't check that plane until I arrive, he replied. Of course, buddy. I'll send you the tickets for tomorrow's flight so we can go over everything. Let me know what the ladies decide. After we hung up, I felt relieved knowing Sean was there to support me. The next day went smoothly. I sent him the electronic ticket information the night before, so he should be flying over the Pacific by now. I had a short talk with Howard about Sean's arrival and his friend who would be assisting. Howard confirmed that the plane was in good shape, but I wanted to check it with Sean for help. Sean arrived in the afternoon, taking a small plane from Honolulu to our local airstrip on Molokai. I took a cab to the airport and waited for him. As soon as he got off the plane, I rushed over to give him a big hug. He wasn't a very sentimental person, but after everything we had been through and being apart for a long time, it made sense. We had shared many experiences together. We took a taxi to the dock, where I showed him his sleeping area. He tossed his suitcase inside, and then we headed to Howard's place. He called a friend to let him know that his flight would arrive about an hour later since he was coming from another island. We passed the time on Howard's boat enjoying iced tea. It's good to drink before the sun gets too hot, isn't it? After about an hour of talking about nothing in particular, we heard the loud sound of an engine as the seaplane got closer to the dock. It seemed like he was a skilled pilot as he landed it perfectly. We walked over to the plane, which looked really well taken care of. The pilot opened the door and stepped out slowly. The woman flying the plane appeared to be in her late 50s and was still very attractive. She walked to Howard, shook his hand, and then turned to me. You must be James, right? She extended her hand, and I shook it. I'm Martha, but everyone calls me Marty. Nice to meet you, Marty, I said. This airplane looks amazing. I was a bit worried when I learned it was a 1957 model, but it looks brand new. I thought to myself, wow, thanks. I did all the restoration myself, mostly in the last few years, she said proudly. Do you mind if my friend and I take a closer look? I asked. She smiled and stepped aside, waving toward the plane. As soon as we got inside, I noticed that she and Howard began a quiet conversation. The inside was really nice. All the seats had white leather covers, and the control panel looked just like new. Even the windows were in great shape, not scratched like I thought they might be. Sean climbed out and opened the engine hatch to take a look. He saw the 627 smoke motor and began checking some connections and running his hands over the blades of the propeller. Sean had me turn some control knobs and pedals to make sure everything moved smoothly. There were no strange sounds that might suggest old or tired parts, but he would probably take apart some parts just to be sure everything was working well before letting me fly it. After about 20 minutes of checking, he looked at me and smiled. I turned back to the pilot with a grin. Marty, I think we really like this plane. How much do you want for it? She seemed to think for a moment. I was asking for $150,000 for her, but I can take $400,000 for you. It was a lot of money, but maybe it was worth it. On the mainland, you could sell planes like this for at least $500,000 in this condition. Marty, if you can bring it down to $375,000, I think we have a deal. I think I can do that, she replied. We agreed and went to Howard's cabin for a drink. Marty decided to have only one drink so she could catch her flight home on time. She shared a bit about her trip to the islands and mentioned that her husband of almost 30 years had just passed away from cancer. She felt it was time to return to the mainland to be closer to her grandchildren. I felt sorry for her loss, but I also thought it was nice that she had a loving family to be with now. We agreed that I would take care of the plane as soon as the funding was sorted out, and we said our goodbyes. She then sailed away from the dock and headed back to her island. Sean and I waved goodbye to Howard and went back to our boat. That night, sleep came slowly. The weather worsened, and a storm came through, making the boat rock. The next few days were tough, but eventually the skies cleared. It took another week to finish the financial paperwork, but I was now the proud owner of a 1957 de Havilland DHC-2 Beaver seaplane. Sean and I took the boat on a day trip to her island. He drove the boat back to our dock while I flew the airplane. The old plane was easy to fly and had no problems. I got back before Sean, so I spent some time with Howard until Sean returned. Over the next few weeks, we sorted out all the official papers and licenses for our business. Puddle Jumpers was starting to take shape. Jenny, the office clerk, decided to stay in Virginia and took a job with FedEx. Tammy, our former office manager, chose to move away with her 12-year-old daughter to escape her unfaithful husband. Hawaii was becoming a popular place for fresh starts. I helped her move to the island, and she rented a small place in town. She took a bigger office for herself, while I used the other room. Sean often stayed with me when he wasn't busy working on the airplane. He also picked up a few part-time jobs at the marina to help with his income. Overall, we weren't very busy, but we enjoyed it. About 2 months later, I received a package in the mail. My divorce was finalized the day before. It was a sad day, but I knew it marked the start of a new chapter in my life. That night, Sean and I decided to visit the little tiki hut bar on the beach. He always supported me, and he knew I needed to forget about that day. The memories were a bit funny too. I avoided tequila this time, but spiced rum ended up affecting me just as much. We both woke up with bad hangovers and promised each other to steer clear of the tiki hut for a while. A week later, my daughter was finally coming to visit. She was going to spend a week at my place right before starting a new semester in college. I made 2 beds for Maddie and her friend, but I knew one would end up being more like a closet. I also went shopping to make sure my kitchen was well stocked for them. When I picked them up at the airport in Honolulu, I was excited to take them to my home on Molokai by seaplane. As soon as I saw Maddie come through security, I hurried over and gave her a big hug. I had missed her so much. "Maddie, oh my gosh, I've missed you," I said, smiling at her friend. "And who is this lovely lady?" I asked. "Dad, this is my girlfriend, Sarah Jones," Maddie replied. "Sarah, it's nice to finally meet you. I've heard so much about you," I said. She looked a little nervous, and I wanted to help her feel comfortable. "Please call me James or Dad if you like. Just relax and enjoy your time here. If you need anything, just ask and I'll take care of it," I said. "Now grab your bags and let's head to the local terminal." They quickly ran to get their things and met me at the terminal. When I say terminal, I mean a small area with a few benches and a door leading to the outside. There was a counter that was often empty and a guard at the door to keep things safe. We stepped outside and I led them to the seaplane. It had floats, but could also use landing wheels if needed. I helped them with their bags, and we all buckled in. Soon, we took off toward Molokai. "So, are you both excited about next semester?" I asked. "Definitely, Mr. H. I mean, Dad. Sorry, it's just going to take some time," Sarah said, her cheeks turning red. I was surprised that Maddie still used my last name, but I was glad they were both together. "Don't worry. I'm getting used to it too. We've moved in together for school this year, so it should be better than last year," Maddie added. I remembered how stressed she was about her classes last time, so I was happy to hear things were looking up. "Maddie, Sarah, I really want you both to enjoy your time here. I've cleaned the rooms on my boat for you to stay in. I made 2 beds, but I figure one can just be a closet. I doubt you'll actually sleep apart," I joked. They both blushed, and Maddie let out a small laugh. "Dad, that's funny, but true," Maddie replied. We all laughed together, enjoying the moment. It felt great to laugh with her again. It had been too long. "Once we get there, we'll grab your things. Then we can meet my roommate, Howard. You two are going to enjoy spending time with him. He's really fun. After that, I'll take you both out to dinner." "Sounds good," they both said together. I had a feeling they often did that, and it seemed nice. We spent the rest of the drive talking mostly about college life. The girls were happy together. Anyone could see that. Now I had to get used to thinking of my daughter as a young woman. When we landed on the water, it was a first for them, so they were excited. After tying the plane to the dock, we walked to my boat. "Papa, is this your boat?" my daughter shouted. "Yes, it's all mine. I let my friend Sean, who is also my mechanic, use one of the beds. You remember him from Virginia, right?" "Oh, yeah, I think so." "That's cool, Dad. Which room is ours?" I showed them under the deck where their rooms were and where the bathroom was. I pointed out Sean's bed and mine, then took them to the kitchen. They sat at the table while I showed them around. It took no time at all. "Ladies, go get settled. When you're ready to meet my friends, come up on deck," I said. They headed to their room while I made myself a drink and went up to my favorite chair. I was enjoying the sound of the seagulls when I heard a soft noise coming from below deck. I turned on the radio and listened to my 80s music playlist. I started to nod my head to Down Under by Men at Work. The song might not have been the best, but it brought back good memories from my younger days. After about 30 minutes, the girls came back looking a bit warm but happy. I wondered what they had been up to, but since it was my daughter, I didn't want to ask. "Hey, are you ready for a drink and to meet my roommate?" I asked. I knew they were both under 21, but I figured it was okay to let them try a little here. "Sure. What is it?" Sarah asked. "I call it beach pineapple. It's a mix of rum and juice that tastes like pineapple. I created it when I first arrived and spent all my time at the beach." "They sound delicious. Can we make some?" they asked. I told them they could pour themselves a glass from the kitchen. They did and joined me on deck with their drinks. I led them out to the dock to Howard's boat. If my 36-foot boat impressed them, then they were in for a treat. Their eyes widened at Howard's big yacht. "Ahoy, Howard, can we come on board?" I called out, expecting him to be resting below deck as usual. I was happily surprised when a beautiful girl with bright red hair came to the railing and waved us over. "Come on up! Howard and Sean are here talking about beer." Personally, I think all beer tastes about the same and isn't very good, but that's just how I feel. We climbed aboard and she smiled and held out her hand. "My name is Tanya Pierce. My friends and I are taking a week off in Hawaii to forget about our busy lives and just relax." I was a bit shocked because I knew who Tanya Pierce was. She was a big movie star, known for many popular films. Her last movie, Windy City, was a suspenseful story about a serial killer in Chicago. I watched it, just like a lot of other people did. I didn't know Howard was friends with famous people, but I guess it makes sense since he has connections. I finally found my voice and said, "It's nice to meet you, Tanya. My name is James. Yes, I know who you are." She smiled, probably used to being recognized. "You mentioned Howard and Sean are talking about beer. I'd love to see that," she said, looking for a way to change the subject. "Sure. Follow me," I replied, and off we went. She led us to the main cabin where I sat in my usual chair and Howard sat on the couch. They each held a pint of dark beer and were arguing about which one was better. Tanya cleared her throat to get their attention and Howard looked up first. "Oh, welcome back, James. I assume one of these lovely girls is your daughter, Madison?" He seemed very interested. "Yes, and this is my pride and joy," he said, pointing to Maddie. "This one is Sarah, her girlfriend. They're staying with me this week. Ladies, this is Howard, my friend, and this is Sean, my best friend and mechanic, though sometimes I think he just pretends to fix things." I winked at Sean, and he waved me off, then turned back to the group. "Welcome, ladies. Ignore your dad. He thinks he's the best pilot." The girls were a bit shocked to be around such interesting people, so they just smiled and said, "Thank you." Howard turned to me. "So, James, since you're here, you can help settle this argument. Sean thinks the dark stout is better than my wheat beer. What do you think?" I replied, "I think it's silly to argue about beer when we could be enjoying the sunshine." I punched the air for emphasis. I turned to Tanya and asked, "What do you think, Tanya? Wouldn't you want to go outside and enjoy this lovely day?" "Oh, absolutely! Let me gather the others and we can all have fun in the bay or something." With that, she dashed down into the boat. "See? At least she knows how to prioritize." "Hey, everyone! Look who's here! Tanya Pierce!" I chuckled, walking over to my daughter. "Girls, why don't you head back to my boat and put on your swimwear? We're going to take this big boat out on the water and really enjoy Hawaii. It's going to be a wonderful day for everyone." Once everyone was ready, Howard took charge of his big yacht, which he called Big Game. Sean and I untied the boat from the dock. Howard led us away from the marina and other boats. Once we were far enough, he turned on the engines, and the boat picked up speed, going fast for its size, about 17 knots. While it wasn't a racing boat, it felt pretty quick. Howard had told us he worked with engineers to make it better, so usually it could cruise at about 13 knots. The speed stirred up a nice splash in the water, and the boat jumped over waves. It was exciting, and everyone was having a great time. After about 20 minutes, Howard slowed down and stopped near a beautiful beach with soft white sand and clear water that gently rolled back and forth. He pressed a button to drop the anchor and announced that we had arrived. Cheers filled the air and everyone hurried to the back deck. Tanya was the last one to join us, followed by 4 friends. She introduced them all. Everyone, these are my friends who came with me. Howard knows them already, but I wanted to introduce them since we're all going to have fun together. She pointed out each one. First is my agent and friend Tyrone. Next to him is his husband, Michael. Then there's my best friend since childhood, Diana, and her husband, Marcus. Howard jumped in. Thanks for the introductions, Tanya. My friends are Sean, whom you've met. The other guy is James, the pilot of that seaplane you saw. His daughter and her friend are with us too. I'm sorry, ladies, but I forgot your names. My daughter blushed a little and said, I'm Madison, but my friends call me Maddie. This is Sarah, my best friend. We go to school together. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for making this trip so nice. Everyone chuckled at her introduction, and then it was time for fun. Maddie and Sarah jumped into the water without hesitation, and when they popped back up, they started playfully splashing each other. Sean followed them with a big cannonball that splashed everyone nearby. It didn't bother anyone at all. Tanya's husband and Tyrone moved to the edge of the boat, and then Michael playfully pushed Tyrone in. Tyrone fell into the water with a loud splash, making everyone jump a bit. Michael jumped in the water after him, but his husband playfully pushed him under for doing so. I took a moment to sit and enjoy my drink while watching everyone have fun. Tanya sat beside me and smiled. Honestly, even without all the movie magic and makeup, she was a stunning woman. Her beautiful blonde hair stood out against her pale skin and dotted shoulders. Her eyes sparkled like emeralds, and I felt like I could look into them forever. I had to shake my head to snap out of my daydream. I thought I heard her ask me something. Sorry, I was a bit distracted. What was that? I asked, hoping I didn't seem foolish. I was just wondering if you like living here, that's all. I live in busy LA, but sometimes I wish I could escape the noise and enjoy this peaceful place like you do. I like it here, I replied. I haven't been to LA, but this place is really nice compared to where I came from. Virginia was okay, but this place feels different, I added. What brought you here? That's quite a big move, she asked with interest. I felt my head drop a little, and she noticed. Oh, I didn't mean to pry, I was just curious. No, it's really okay. I just needed to leave a tough situation, I said. I paused a bit, unsure of how much I should share with this lovely woman. Then I went on. My wife was seeing someone else, and my business partner tried to hurt me to take my part of our business. Her shocked expression showed me that I had probably said too much. I tried to soften my words. Things were a bit wild for a while, but it's better now. I have my plane and this beautiful place, my daughter who means everything to me, and my friends here. Honestly, I feel good about it now. The shocked look on her face faded, and she regained her calm. I'm truly sorry to hear that. I'm glad you're doing well now, she said with a nervous laugh. That does sound really tough. Let's change the subject. We should enjoy our time in Hawaii. She smiled brightly, and I couldn't help but smile back. Do you want to talk about yourself? I'm guessing no one ever asks you about your life, right? My tease made us both laugh again. Talking to her was surprisingly easy. I know I probably had a typical view, thinking famous people were all distant and hard to talk to, but Tanya was different. She felt as down-to-earth as anyone I've ever met. Sure, James, let's talk about me. What do you want to know? She asked, a little shyly. I found it endearing. Tanya, we don't need to get too personal. I want to know you better, but I'm not going to ask you anything you're not comfortable sharing. Of course not, she said with a smile. I trust you. We only just met, but I trust you. If you want to learn more about me, just ask. She smiled, showing her bright white teeth. It was a lovely smile from such a nice lady. So let's start with the basics. Where are you from? That's simple. I grew up in Nebraska in a town called Hastings, just south of I-80 and Grand Island Highway. Hastings isn't very small for Nebraska, but where I live now, it seems tiny. She laughed a little at her own joke. My parents still live there along with my brother. He just turned 19 and is going to Army camp this summer. My sister is married and lives in Minneapolis with her husband. They're expecting their first baby in January. Wow, that sounds like a wonderful family. How often do you get to see them? Not as often as I wish. I usually go home for the holidays, but lately, that's about it. I had to sneak in through the back door of the flower shop to take this little break. Talk about feeling like a spy just to get away. It can't be easy. All this attention and everything. Honestly, I don't know how anyone handles it. She tensed a little when I spoke. I don't want to upset you. I just don't think this life is for me. I think you're really brave for dealing with it for your job." She relaxed and was her cheerful self again. "Thank you. Yes, it can be tough, but mostly I've gotten used to it. Honestly, what I dislike the most is how fake many people are around me. This talk feels the most real and honest I've had in the last 6 months. Most people around me either flatter me or ask for money for their projects. It becomes exhausting very quickly. Diana helps, but she has her own life and can't be here all the time for me. Okay, enough about you and your boring life. My sarcasm knows no limits. What about your vacation this week? How long do you plan to stay here? And what do you want to do while you're here? Thanks. Well, my main goal was to relax and enjoy some time away from everything for a week. I plan to stay until Saturday, which is just 6 days. This." She lifted her glass and waved it between us. This is exactly what I hoped for when I left. I nodded, raised my glass, and said, "Let's toast to that." We clinked our glasses and both took a long sip, finishing our drinks. "I know you wanted to avoid the crowds, but I'd love to show you my city. We could have fun there, you know. I think I'd enjoy that. Maybe sometime soon." I thought it would be fun, but I had my doubts because of our age and school differences. She was still much taller than me. Maybe I should stop worrying and just enjoy myself. We both got up to refill our glasses. It was a pleasant conversation, and I looked forward to seeing her again, if the chance came up. It turned out I would have plenty of chances. Later that day, Howard told us that we would stay overnight in a quiet spot and go back to the main dock the next day. Tanya's group wanted to check out one of the small islands nearby and camp on the beach for a few nights. Naturally, Howard asked me to join them, and I didn't want to say no. The only condition was that Maddie and Sarah had to come too. Tanya playfully hit my arm when I suggested she might not invite them, but at least she laughed when she did. I liked that laugh more and more. That night, we gathered in the main cabin and tried to play a drinking game. We started watching the movie Super Trooper, and the idea was that every time someone said the father's name, we all had to take a drink. Somehow we made it through the whole movie without anyone falling overboard. Afterward, we went to our rooms and quickly fell asleep. I heard some sounds from other cabins, but I didn't care who it was. I fell asleep fast and woke up to the sound of waves. I got up and saw that Diane was already in the galley waiting for the coffee to brew. I sat down next to her and waited too. She didn't look hungover, or maybe she was just good at hiding it. Either way, she was pretty, like someone from a friendly neighborhood. "So, Mr. Holmes, are you flying with us today? I hope you're awake enough for that." Her voice was sharp and unexpected. "May I call you Diana?" I asked politely, and she nodded. "I never drink and fly. I wouldn't risk my life or my passengers' lives." She replied, "So you hang around here with no plans?" Her tone was again harsh. I must have upset her somehow. "Look, I don't know what I did to annoy you, but don't think my relaxation means I'm lazy. I have a business in Virginia that does well, especially since my ex hurt me. I came here to start again. I still run my business, but at a more comfortable pace. I don't need you telling me how to live." Getting angry, I grabbed a mug of coffee and went out on deck. How could she accuse me of being a lazy drunk? I settled down in the captain's chair and looked at the water. There weren't any boats around, just one airplane high in the sky. The quiet was as calming as ever. "Excuse me?" came a soft voice from behind me. I turned and saw Diana looking uncertain. "I was rude, and you didn't deserve that. I saw you talking to Tanya yesterday, and I was worried you were just another jerk after her money." I thought for a moment and realized she was trying to protect a friend. "Don't worry about it. It's really not a big deal, Diana. You're just a great friend, and I'm thankful for that." Talking with her felt really nice. I haven't done that with anyone for a long time. I have no plans to take advantage of her. Sometimes I think I need to look out for her because no one else seems to. She isn't very good at spotting people who want to use her. I smiled at her. "So what do you do when you aren't hanging out with your famous friend?" I laughed softly to lighten the mood. She joined in my laughter before she answered. "Actually, my husband and I are both doctors. He works in sports medicine and I focus on obstetrics. We were friends growing up and all through high school. Tanya went to college at an art school in the Northeast, while I went to medical school at the University of Madison." We lost touch after high school, even though we both knew what we wanted to study. Life just happened. We ran into each other again in Los Angeles at a fundraiser for kids with cancer. We picked up right where we left off and have been close ever since. Wow, I'm a bit jealous. That sounds lovely. My best friend Todd lives very far away. I haven't seen him in about 8 years. Sean is a great friend too, and he's quickly becoming like Todd. But I still miss the fun times with Todd. Oh well, Hakuna Matata. What's that? Did you just quote a Disney movie? She laughed at my confusion. Yes, I did. Since I got here, I told myself I wouldn't let worries get to me. So I keep saying that phrase in my mind. It really helps. She smiled again, not laughing at me this time. Well, it's a nice thought anyway, right? I'm sorry for being rude, and I look forward to talking more. She stood up and paused. You know Tanya really likes you, right? I could tell by how she acted around you last night. I was surprised to hear that. I mean, she was lovely, but she wasn't really my type. She was beautiful and so famous that even the dolphins probably knew her name. I think my face showed Diana how strange that sounded to me. Trust me, she's into you. Honestly, all this movie star stuff aside, she is just a woman like anyone else. And you, James, are a mystery. I think that's what she finds attractive, along with how handsome you are. Anyway, get to know her better, and who knows where it might go. Just be careful with her, or you'll have to deal with me. She finished with a playful grin and walked down to the main deck. It was definitely an interesting chat. By this time, I heard others talking downstairs and decided to head down from the upper deck to get ready for the day. I met nearly everyone except Howard and Sean. I guess those two keep the same sleep schedule since they were always sleeping off their late nights. Tanya smiled as I walked by, so I turned to the group. Are we all ready for a fun time? I asked. Everyone nodded. We were going to fly to a small island, just like you asked, and camp on the beach. When we got back to the dock, everyone needed to be ready to leave about an hour later. I pulled up the anchor and started the big yacht's engine, bringing the throttle to half. The yacht roared as the propellers started spinning fast. I turned the yacht around and we sailed back home. After about 20 minutes, Sean finally came up on deck and nodded at me, but he didn't smile. I felt bad for him. He must have tried to have another drinking contest with Howard. That was always a mistake. Howard had more experience than most of us. I shook my head and kept going. Another half hour went by, and then Howard finally showed up. He looked terrible. There was no nice way to say it, but he did have a smile that seemed strange given how he looked. He walked over to the wheel where I was and just stood by me. "How are you feeling, Howard?" "To be honest, you don't look too good," I said. "I've been better." "How long till we get to the harbor?" he asked. "Another 40 minutes or so. I already told the group that once we dock, they should pack up and meet me at the airplane in an hour. I need to prepare for the flight and get all my supplies ready." "Okay." He hummed and went to the kitchen. Overall, the night on the water was great, and the next few days looked just as exciting. I couldn't wait to spend more time with Tanya. I hadn't felt this way since college, and it made me feel young again. I just hoped I was enough for someone like her. We arrived at the harbor without any problems, and everyone went their separate ways to get ready for the main event. I rushed to my boat to grab what I needed and brought it to the plane. After putting my things away, I began the pre-flight check. By this time, Sean was feeling better and helped me with the inspection. He wasn't going to fly with us, but he wanted to pitch in anyway. 10 minutes before the hour was up, Tanya and her group came down to the dock with several bags. I told them we could fit most of it, but we might have to squeeze a bit. This made the ladies grumble and frown. The guys didn't mind and spoke up, saying that losing a couple of bags was no big deal. "It's fine," Marcus said. "I didn't bring that much," agreed Michael. Tyrone stepped in to support the girls. "We won't throw any of this away. We just need to make it fit." Tanya stayed quiet during most of the talk, but she nodded at Tyrone's comment and then burst into laughter. Soon, everyone was laughing so hard that some had tears in their eyes. As the laughter faded, everyone boarded the plane. The luggage had plenty of space. We took off smoothly and arrived at our chosen island. The landing was a bit bumpy, mainly because the waves around this island were stronger than I expected. Still, we managed to bring the airplane down safely. I pulled the rope up to tie it to the strongest tree I could find. We set up our camp on the shore as we planned. We built a fire ring with rocks and set up our tents. There were 8 of us and 4 tents. We also made a covering for our meals, putting a stove and some food containers on it. When everything was ready, we all gathered in the eating area. I spoke like a semi-guide and said, "Listen up, you're all adults, but I really suggest that no one goes out alone. Also, see those wooded areas behind us? You can explore, but don't wander too far. It'll be hard to find anyone out there, especially after dark." After this short safety talk, we went our own ways. I set up my folding chair by the water and sat back to relax. All I needed was a beach snack and I was good to go. My quiet time was broken by a shadow that passed between me and the sun. Do you always just sit still? Or do you ever walk around these beautiful islands? I looked up and saw Tanya with her hands on her hips. Sometimes, I guess, depending on who I'm with. Why do you want to go for a walk? She smiled at me in a way that made her look even cuter. Yes, that would be nice. So I got up and walked with her down to the beach. Anyone would have said yes, but I really liked being near her. I didn't even think about the fact that she seemed to be about 10 years younger than me. We walked barefoot, not really watching the time. The tide began to come in, and soon our feet got wet. We turned back toward the camp as the water rose. On our way back, she slipped her hand into mine and we held hands. I glanced at her, not sure what she was feeling. Her bright smile could have lit up the whole beach and said a lot about her feelings in that moment. Honestly, I found it hard to leave the camp. I vaguely remember getting back to find Marcus and Tyrone getting dinner ready. Diane and Michael were walking back to camp with big armfuls of firewood. They stacked their wood on a neat pile and then sat down. All 8 of us joked about the day's events. I tossed some wood into the fire and built up a nice flame. As day turned to night, we all sat around the fire and started telling stories. It felt like I had always belonged to this group of friends, and it was wonderful. Too soon, it was time to close up for the night. I let the fire fade and headed toward one of the tents. Diane and her husband had already zipped up the door to their tent. Tyrone and his partner had just opened their tent door and were climbing in. Madison and Sarah were tucked away in their tent while I thought about saying goodnight to them. All that was left was for Tanya and me to share the 4th tent. I hadn't thought much about it before, but now that we were at the entrance, I felt a bit nervous. Here I was, an adult feeling like a shy teenager, and I hoped something special would happen between us. I opened the tent flap to let her in, then sat down behind her. I zipped it up and called out to everyone else. "Good night, everyone!" A joyful chorus replied. "Good night!" Finally, we settled in. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt lucky to have Tanya sleeping next to me in a tent on the beach in paradise. The next few days were much the same. Tanya and I found ways to sneak into the tent together as often as we could. Her friends teased us for it, but we didn't mind. We cherished our time alone. When it was time to pack up and leave, neither of us wanted this moment to end. Even if it wasn't love, I certainly felt drawn to this wonderful woman. She made me feel alive again. I didn't want it to finish, but it had to. She needed to return to LA for a new project, and I had more traveling to do. When it was time to take them to the airport, we both felt a little sad. "James, I don't know what happened this week, but I felt something special with you," she said. "I wish you could come with me." I replied, "I felt it too, whatever it was. Tanya, I can't leave just yet, but I'll visit you in LA soon. How about I come over in 2 weeks and spend a week with you? You can show me your apartment and we can explore the city together." "That sounds great," she smiled. "Promise me you'll come." "I promise I'll visit you in California and we'll spend time together." I winked, which made her laugh. She gave me her home and cell numbers. The printed number on the front was for her agent, Tyrone, in case I couldn't reach her. I nodded, feeling a bit choked up. I gave her my card with my contact numbers. We hugged, shared a light kiss goodbye, and waved as they went through security to board the plane. I stood watching as the plane left the gate, then turned to head back to my daughter as her plane took off. I wondered if I would ever see Tanya again. I had made her a promise, and I intended to keep it. Maddie stood with Sarah, whispering quietly, then got quiet when I approached. It felt good to be with my daughter and see her smile again. I knew the issues between Caitlin and me might have upset her, so I was relieved she hadn't become really down. She deserved happiness, and I was trying my best to help her find it. Okay, Maddie, are you ready to go back to school? I really enjoyed having you here, sweetie. I was surprised and couldn't find the words. She knew what I felt. Daddy, I love you too, she said. She moved into my arms and we shared a warm hug. I signaled for Sarah to join us, and soon we were all hugging together. When we finally let go, the girls exchanged smiles and giggles. Daddy, you really like Tanya, don't you? Sarah asked. Yeah, I think so, I replied simply. You should call her tomorrow and let her know you're thinking about her. We girls like that, Sarah added. I nodded, grateful for their advice. Thank you both for coming to see me. I love you, I said. Are you going to make it official? Is Sarah going to be my daughter-in-law soon? Sarah just smiled, and Maddie turned a little red. We shared one last hug, and I made Maddie promise to call me as soon as they landed. I watched as they boarded the plane, and my heart sank when I saw it move away from the building and head to the runway. With my girls gone again, I went back to my plane to prepare for my flight back to the marina. Everything seemed fine, and the fuel gauge showed plenty of fuel to reach my dock. I started the engine and took off after getting permission from the control tower. I pushed the throttle and soon lifted off the ground. I never grow tired of that feeling. The flight home was smooth with clear skies. Then I heard a loud pop from the front of the plane. After a moment of nothing, I relaxed. About 10 minutes later, another loud pop startled me. I quickly checked everything. All my instruments looked okay, but the next loud pop surprised me so much that I hit my fist on the dashboard. One gauge showed very low oil pressure. This was serious. How could the oil pressure fall so low? I called out my location for help, knowing I might not make it to the airport, but I had to try. The dispatcher told me there was a dirt strip on a nearby island about 10 minutes away. I started searching for it as the engine began to sputter, filling me with worry. I had a lot of flying experience, but I had never faced an emergency like this. Smoke began to come from the right side of the engine, and I felt the power drop as the plane slowed down. I gently lowered the nose to lose altitude and keep flying as I descended. In front of me, I spotted a small island. I reported my coordinates and got ready for an emergency landing. As I got closer, I realized the island was empty and didn't have a runway. The plane was flying down toward the water. It was getting closer and closer. I pulled the controls as hard as I could and aimed for a small bay on one side of the island. If I could land the airplane, even if the engine was not working well, it would be easier to see than patterns in the sand. The altimeter was a problem. It showed I was at 300 feet and going down fast, 250, then 100. I tried to keep steady with the rocks and waves all around. Then the plane hit the water harder than ever. I felt it bounce, then slam down again. My head hit the dashboard. That was the last thing I remembered before everything went dark. In the next part of my story, when I was about 31 years old, my parents were suddenly taken from me after 10 years of marriage. It was a terrible accident. It wasn't caused by a drunk driver or someone who fell asleep. I wish it had been less painful for them. They were driving home in a thunderstorm when the rain turned into a heavy downpour. My dad didn't see it coming. The car's brakes failed, the police said, and they crashed through a barrier and fell into the river. The water was rushing so fast that the car was quickly swept away. It got stuck on a rock in the middle of the river, almost a quarter of a mile from the road. The police said they died from drowning. I can't imagine a worse way to go, knowing you can't breathe and that you're running out of time. I still have nightmares sometimes, not as much as before. In my dreams, I am in the back seat of that car with them. The car goes off the road and into the river, floating like a cork until it sinks. The water is so fast that we can't open the doors. One window breaks and water rushes in, filling the car. I usually wake up right around this point. Caitlin often comforts me at night, hugging me and whispering that everything will be okay. Luckily, I hadn't had that nightmare for a long time, so it shocked me when I woke up in complete darkness after having it again. This time was different. Caitlin and I were in the front seat, and Maddie was in the back. My heart raced and I was sweating. I looked around and could barely see my hands in front of me. I could feel glass on my knees and the floor crunching under my shoes. The darkness was so thick that I couldn't see anything else. I shook my head, and my mind hurt. That wasn't a good idea. But after the spots cleared, I could see a bit better. I unbuckled my seatbelt and felt relieved that I wasn't hurt. Now I wished I had bought a newer airplane. This old plane clearly didn't have many of the safety features that newer models do. I looked around my seat and spotted what I needed on the floor: my flashlight. I quickly took it and turned it on. At first, it was too bright, and I couldn't see anything, but that feeling went away fast. I looked around me for the first time since I crashed. I wasn't sure how bad the damage was, but I could tell that the floats of the plane had hit the water hard. My legs hurt a bit, and I had a big headache. I felt my head but didn't notice any blood, just a big bump on my forehead. I shone the light on my legs and arms. I saw a few small scratches, but nothing too bad. After standing up, the airplane shifted a little, so I decided to move slowly. I still didn't know how hurt I was, so I needed to be careful. When I pointed the light outside, I saw palm trees to my right and the beach beyond them. The front windows showed a nice view. On my left, the reflection of the water told me that the plane had reached the shore and was stuck sideways in the sand. That was a good sign. At least I could stay by the sea for a while, swaying with the waves and hoping that the plane wouldn't sink. Looking toward the engine, I saw no smoke or fire, which was a relief. Whatever had happened to it was already done. The airplane swayed slightly again, so I guessed one of the floats was still in the water. I needed to tie it down before the tide took the plane away. I walked over to the right side door and looked down. I saw sand and nothing else. I opened the door and jumped down, landing hard on the ground. My right leg hurt much worse than I expected, and I struggled to stand up. It hurt, but I could still support myself. I thanked my lucky stars that I didn't have any broken bones, but I still felt a sharp sting. I knew I wouldn't be jumping again anytime soon. Limping, I went to the rear compartments to grab the emergency supplies and rope stored there, then closed the compartment. I placed the emergency kit on the seat in front of me and stepped away from the airplane to look for something to tie the rope to. I noticed a palm tree nearby and headed toward it. I wrapped the rope around the tree and tied it as tightly as I could. I pulled the rest of the rope back to the plane, managing to wrap it around the front support of the float, tying it there as well. It felt like a small miracle that I had enough rope. I think I had about 2 feet left over. Once I finished, I felt a mix of emotions and began to think carefully. I had no idea how long it had been since I crashed, and I realized I was on an island that didn't look like it had anyone living on it, at least not near where I had landed. I was hurt, but not too badly. Without repairs, my airplane probably wouldn't fly again. I had some emergency water, but that was all. There was no food and no signs of anyone else around. I realized I could be here by myself for a while. I took out my phone, but of course it didn't have any signal. I switched it to airplane mode to save battery. Okay, think, James. Think. The radio. I reported my situation, or at least what I thought was my situation, to the operator. The problem was that this island didn't have a dirt airstrip like they thought, so they might have started looking in the wrong place. I slowly climbed back into the airplane and turned on the radio. The light came on, but it went off right away. It might have been broken or the battery was dead while I was unconscious. What was I going to do now? I checked my phone again and saw it was about 3:30 a.m. Realizing I wouldn't have time to do anything while it was dark, I climbed back into the airplane, closed the doors, locked them, and went to sleep. If I had been thinking clearly, I would have forced myself to stay awake just in case I had a concussion. Luckily, I didn't have one. I found out later that I was fine. I woke up to the sun rising over the palm trees and birds singing in the distance. I got out of the airplane to look around. I didn't remember much from my days as a Boy Scout, but I knew I could go a few days without food if I had to. The real issue was that I couldn't last long without water. My first job was to check what supplies were on the airplane. I opened the doors at the back and found a light toolbox, my luggage, a signal flare, and some extra bungee cords. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The flare only had one use, but it could be very helpful if someone flew low enough or brought their boat nearby. I took the supplies to the edge of the forest to keep them dry. As I took a short break, a big, colorful parrot landed on a branch above me, watching me and spreading its feathers. Well, at least I wasn't alone. I went back to the airplane, climbed into the cockpit, and looked around. I was lucky to find several bottles of water and those cheap peanuts that major airlines serve. The water was great news, but the peanuts wouldn't last long. Besides the water and snacks, I didn't find anything else useful in the cabin. I walked back to the trees, sat in the shade, and thought about my situation. How did this happen? Why was I having such bad luck lately? Was it my fault? Did I check the airplane as well as I should have before taking off? Shouldn't Sean have found this problem? I was at a party with everyone else, but I stayed sober the day my daughter left, so that shouldn't have made any difference. There were so many questions in my mind, but I didn't have answers yet. Okay, enough thinking. It was time to focus. I told myself, what do I need to do to get rescued? This place is well known, so hopefully someone in a plane would see me. I just needed to find a way to be noticed. I had a flare, but it was only good for one shot. I needed to make some kind of smoke signal that could be seen from a distance. Plus, I had to find something to eat. Maybe I could catch a fish in a tide pool like they do in the movies. Seriously? Am I really counting on a movie to save my life? I shook my head and laughed. I promised myself I wouldn't end up talking to a soccer ball. That would be too much. Maybe I could chat with a parrot instead. What was I thinking? I rested in the shade, wondering how long it would take for a boat or plane to come close enough to see my flare. I spotted a big cargo ship far away, but it wouldn't see me. I had to find a way to start a fire. I walked to the trees and started collecting anything I could find. Twigs, branches, large leaves, and even a few big logs that had fallen long ago. I gathered everything and built a tall, teepee-shaped fire pile a bit away from the trees. Now I just needed a way to light it. For now, my signal fire was ready. Feeling a bit proud, I sat down in the shade and took a sip of water. Suddenly, the bottle was empty. Oh no, I needed to watch how much I was drinking. I had no idea how long I would be here. Maybe I could find some treasure, like Jack Sparrow. A good stash of lemonade would be great right now. I looked at my phone and saw it was almost 2 o'clock in the afternoon. By now, I was getting pretty hungry, staring at the peanuts as if they were going to turn into a feast. Too bad that wasn't happening. I stood up and looked around. There didn't seem to be anything nearby to eat unless I wanted to munch on palm leaves. I hadn't been on the island long enough to think they were good food. At least I chuckled at the idea. Could I use what I saw in movies to catch fish? Maybe I should explore deeper into the trees for something. After some thinking and a loud growl from my stomach, I decided to walk inland. I walked for at least 10 minutes, getting so far from the beach that I could hardly hear the waves over the ferns, palms, and flowering plants. Finally, I came across a grassy field. To my right, there was a small pond and a few berry bushes nearby. I hurried to the berries and picked a few handfuls into my shirt. I didn't know if they were safe to eat, but I took some anyway and hoped for the best. I looked at the pond. The water seemed clear, but I knew it wasn't safe to drink without boiling. If I could find a way to heat it, maybe I could drink it. I also saw small fish swimming around, each just a few inches long. I wondered if I could catch enough to eat. I carried the berries to the beach and sat down again. I tasted one berry. It was slightly sweet and actually quite nice. After eating a few more, I decided that if they made me sick, then that was just how it would be. The parrot was still nearby, watching me. I had eaten enough berries for now, and there were a few left. I chose to sleep in the airplane, thinking it would be safer there. The next morning, I woke up to a sound that seemed like a helicopter flying nearby. I climbed out of the plane, grabbed my rocket launcher, and looked up at the sky. I couldn't see anything, but I could still hear it. Maybe my ears were playing tricks on me because the sound was getting quieter and then louder again. After a few long minutes, the sound faded away until I couldn't hear it anymore. "Darn it!" I shouted into the air. I was very disappointed. Maybe I should have started a signal fire instead of depending on the flare gun. I walked towards the trees and saw that all the berries I had left were either gone or damaged, and I had nothing to eat. I should have been smarter and taken them with me into the plane. An animal or that parrot must have eaten them. Now I was hungry again, and there were no more berries. I walked back to the grassy area near the pond. There were a few berries left, but only a handful. I looked at the fish and decided to try catching one with my hands. It turned out to be a slow process. I stood there for a long time, waiting for a fish to swim close enough for me to catch it. What was I thinking? That the fish would just swim into my hands? Clearly, I needed to think better, and it reminded me of what had happened in the last few years. If I had retired earlier, maybe none of this would have happened. We used to talk about enjoying life and traveling. I took a deep breath, thinking about a future that was no longer possible. Eventually, a fish swam close enough, and I managed to catch it. It tried to get away, but I pressed its head against my knee until it stopped moving. I had seen this in a movie and hoped it would work. Now I needed to find a way to make a fire. I didn't smoke, so I didn't have a lighter with me. I wondered if there was anything in the airplane that might help. If there was any power left in the battery, I could try to connect some wires to make a spark. The chances were low, but what else could I do? I could always go back to basics and try rubbing a stick against a rock. They taught us that in Scouts, but they used special sticks that worked well for making fire. You can't buy those here. I chuckled at my own joke, but it didn't last long. First, I made a small circle of stones and added some twigs and small branches inside to help the battery work better. I found a stick and tore a piece from my shirt to wrap around the end of it. I took off the positive wire from the terminal and touched the negative one with it. I was excited when it sparked. I held my makeshift stick to the battery, and after a few tries, it crackled. I blew gently on it to help it catch fire better and was happy when it did. I tossed it into a smaller fire and watched it flare up. I pushed the top of my little fish with a stick and pulled it with my hands. It looked dirty, but that didn't matter. I just wanted to clean it enough to cook. After cleaning it as best as I could without a knife, I pierced the fish again and placed it over the fire to cook. While I waited, I gazed up at the sky and the water below. I spotted a few planes flying high above, but nothing closer. Strangely, I saw several big cargo ships far away, but nothing nearby. I didn't want to waste my signal fire. This was dull. There was nothing to do but survive. I finished my second bottle of water and ate the small fish I had prepared. It didn't fill me up like a big meal, but it was okay. I had to eat slowly to avoid the bones and scales. After I was done, I sat by the fire until it turned to glowing coals. The coals kept me warm for a while, but soon cooled down. I decided to give up on the night and went back to sleep in the plane. I was jolted awake by a loud crackling noise. The airplane shook hard, and rain hammered against the wings and windows, some even coming through the broken one. It was still dark outside. The sun was hiding behind thick thunderclouds. A thunderstorm was the last thing I needed now. I stayed inside the airplane and waited for the storm to pass. Thankfully, it eased up and eventually stopped after an hour or so. I felt worn out, and with the sun out, sleep wasn't going to happen anytime soon. I climbed down from the plane and checked my signal fire. The wood was soaked, and I hoped the sun would dry it quickly. Wet wood could be useful since it would create more smoke when it burned. I remembered this from a camping trip years ago. The day felt lost, so I ate a few peanuts, drank half a bottle of water, and stayed in my little campsite. The parrot kept me company, but it always looked at me with a teasing stare as if to say, "You're not going to escape this place." I didn't really dislike the bird, but sometimes I felt like throwing a stone at it just for being there. No boats came near my island, and I only heard one airplane flying overhead. I got my flare ready, but never saw the plane. It must have gone over the other side of the island, and that made me very angry. "Why can't you find me?" I shouted, shaking my fist at the sky when no one replied. I sank back onto the sand. I wasn't crying, but I wished I could. This was not how I imagined spending my last days. I wanted to be away from my old life, but not like this. I finished the day with some leftover peanuts and a bottle of water. The next day, I tried to connect the wires from the battery to the radio, but they were too short. I had to take out the battery and finally hooked it up directly to the radio. It turned on, and I quickly started calling for help on the radio. I didn't know how much time I had, so I didn't wait for long. I tried to explain what happened and where I was when I fell. I started receiving mixed answers, but then the battery ran out quickly. The radio went silent, and I could only hope someone heard my message and could find me soon. I was upset with myself for not thinking of this 2 days earlier. "Damn it!" I shouted out loud, not caring if anyone heard me. Maybe I should look for a soccer ball to distract myself. The parrot wasn't much help with that. I spent the rest of the day searching for berries and found another bush near the clearing I had seen earlier. I tried to catch another fish from the pond, but didn't succeed. The berries were tasty, and I ended up eating all of them. I still felt hungry afterward. In the evening, I drank half a bottle of water and sat down by the edge of the pond again. I must have fallen asleep on the beach as I woke up to the cool air on my face. The warm light of sunrise peeked over the mountain on my island. I had only half a bottle of water left, and now I had peanuts and berries for breakfast to fill me. That gave me an idea. I looked down the beach but didn't see what I needed. I walked along the shore for at least a mile, turned a corner, and found exactly what I was hoping to see: a tide pool. There, in the shallow water, was a tide pool that was at least a foot or two deep in the middle. I hoped to catch something in it, as I was very close to being really hungry. I stood in the water up to my waist and hoped I could catch a fish. I waited there for what felt like forever, but I didn't see anything I could grab. I climbed out and went into the open ocean, wondering if there was anything waiting for me there. I swam out to where the water was up to my chest, but I could still see the bottom clearly. I saw fish swimming, but they were moving really fast. I wasn't totally sure about my plan, but I decided to stick with it a little longer. Soon, I noticed a fish about 2 feet long swimming slowly next to my feet without me moving. I turned and reached down to try to grab it quickly. I got a good hold on it, thinking I might be able to swim away, but then I spotted trouble. 2 predators wanted that fish too. Before I knew it, a dark gray shape swam right in front of me and grabbed the fish from my hands. If it had come just a bit closer, I could have lost my arm. A shark, probably around 4 or 5 feet long, snatched the fish, its fins sticking out of the water proudly. I froze, letting the shark take its meal, and carefully backed away until I felt safe in deeper water. I had never seen a shark before, only on nature shows. I realized I never wanted to get close to a shark again. I made my way back to the shore and sat down with a thud. I was still shaken, but now I had another problem. The shark had stolen my dinner, and now I would be hungry again. Great. With no other options, I walked back to where the plane had crashed. I was so tired. My mouth felt dry and my stomach was growling. I was really in trouble and didn't know what to do. I just sat and waited. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for, but it seemed like that was all I could do. Maybe I was just waiting for the end. The annoying parrot was still there, making noise and tilting its head. I didn't care anymore. My eyes felt heavy, so I climbed back into the airplane and fell asleep. I woke up with the sunrise and saw it would be another beautiful day. But without food or water, I knew my day would be tough. I sat down on the beach. At my lowest point, I thought about strange things. Could I end it all with a rocket launcher? That seemed unlikely. Would I swim out and let the sharks get me? No, that would probably hurt a lot before it ended. It's odd to think about how you will die. Most people just assume they will grow old, fall asleep, and never wake up. I always thought that was how I would go. As I sat there thinking about my end, I suddenly heard it. The faint sound of an airplane getting closer. It wasn't near yet, but I knew it was coming my way. I jumped up and, without thinking, fired a flare gun into the signal pile. The flare mostly sent out light and smoke, but also created a flame that lit up the pile. I stood there like a fool, fanning the fire with my hands to make it burn faster. Before long, everything was blazing. I stepped away from the heat and hoped the airplane would see the smoke. At the last moment, I grabbed a stick and wrote "help" in the sand. It felt like forever, but finally I spotted it. What a beautiful sight. The airplane was flying over the mountains, coming towards me. It passed overhead and made another circle. Then it slowed down and I jumped with joy. I knew the plane couldn't land, but as it flew by, they threw a box down to me with some water and a blanket. I sat down, took a drink of water, and waited to be rescued. After a few hours, a boat finally arrived, and I had never felt so happy to see anyone. Thank goodness for the Coast Guard. I thanked them over and over. They said it was just their job, but I wanted them to know how grateful I was. A medic on the boat checked on me. After that, they took me to the base clinic. I was told to rest and drink plenty of water, but I felt okay. While I waited, I was told that one of my friends was coming to get me. I must have dozed off because the sun was setting when I woke up and saw Sean next to my bed. He smiled when he saw I was awake. "James, I'm so glad you're okay. We were really worried when you didn't return. We heard you radioed for help after the crash and that some fishing boat got your message and told the Coast Guard. Thank goodness. Let's go home," he said. We left, and he drove me back to Molokai. As we walked down the dock to my boat, I noticed a woman standing next to it. It was Caitlin. "What is she doing here?" I asked. "Sean, what's going on?" "She came after Maddie called. I don't know why she's here, but it might help you figure things out," he replied. I really didn't want to see her again, but Sean was right. I needed some answers. And after being away for almost a week, I was ready to face her. "Caitlin, why are you here?" I asked. "James, please listen. I know I'm the last person you want to see, but I had to come. Maddie called me, and I got on the first plane out, she said. Why did you come? Did you want to upset me again? I replied, feeling my anger rise. Tears were already forming in her eyes, but I was determined to hold my ground. I came here to try and forget you, she said. It didn't work, but I tried. I never deserved what happened between us. I loved you for so long. I know, she said, her voice shaking. Please, if you care about me, just hear me out. Though I was still upset, I saw a chance to finally move forward. Maybe I could let her explain and then put this all behind us for good. I'm willing to listen to what you want to say, but after that, I need you to go. She nodded, and I walked her back to a small shelter by the water where we could sit. I took a seat across from her and waited for her to speak. I still felt upset about what had happened, and all I wanted to do was go and rest. I'm really sorry for what I did, she began. I know it may not mean much right now, but I still care for you. I scoffed softly and replied, Not enough, right? I know I made a big mistake and I will always regret it. I'm going to tell you everything and hope that one day you can forgive me. I motioned for her to go on. A guy named Cyrus started flirting with me a few months ago, around the time you were helping with the tornado victims in Oklahoma. At first, it was just harmless fun, something I was used to. He would come around every time you were away overnight. I think that's when he planted doubts in your mind. He would ask things like, Has James called you yet? Or, I wonder if he goes to bars when he's out. You believed him. Have I ever given you a reason to think I was unfaithful? I asked. Honestly, no. But the way he kept talking made me wonder. When you would joke with me from afar, your answers seemed light-hearted, like they were just for fun. After hearing Cyrus, I started to doubt. I know I should have asked you directly, she continued, but that doesn't explain why you got close to him. She frowned and shook her head, but went on. One night when you weren't home, Cyrus came over after we each had a glass of wine. He asked if I had heard from you. I hadn't, so I called you. Do you remember that night I called? Yeah, I was eating dinner at Hooters. It was really loud in there, I replied. What did you think? I was out looking for fun. Well, at first, no, but then I heard chatter from other women. You said you had to go when we hung up. Cyrus told me you liked to hang out with younger women when you weren't home. He said he had spent time with you. That made me so mad. It added to my anger about how often your job kept taking you away. I felt angry all over again. She seemed to have a way of pushing my buttons. I'm sorry for everything, she said, pausing to gather her thoughts. That night he comforted me in a way I needed. I told myself that if you could get attention from others, so could I. But honestly, while we were together, I was thinking about you. It felt nice, but it was nothing like the love we share. After that night, he started coming over whenever you were not home. I couldn't understand why I kept going back to him, but we also met at his place a few times when you were around. I shook my head. How could I have been so blind? You had been unfaithful for so long. I had my doubts after I learned he was back when I was away, but the harsh truth hurt more than I wanted to admit. The night you were with those government guys, Cyrus came by and showed me some pictures. Until then, I had been upset with you because of what I thought was happening. But those pictures made me so furious that I decided it was time to make you feel the same way. I felt so foolish. If I had looked closer, it wouldn't have mattered anyway. You had already done something wrong by then. I can't believe I didn't see it. You were very good at hiding things. I never wanted to hurt you until that night when he told me you were out with that guy and his two rough friends. I lost my cool. I told him I wanted you to understand the pain I felt. I wanted you to know how it felt to have your heart broken. I'm not saying it was the right choice. It's just how I felt at that moment. Well, I got what I wanted. That night nearly destroyed me and ended my love for you. I still remember all the happy times we had, but I can't go back. James, I thought you were being unfaithful. I don't care anymore. You should have told me. You should have treated me better before you got involved with him. Did you know he wanted to harm me? And why didn't you call for help? I would have, but when I returned home, everything was already cleaned up. Tears rolled down her face again. Good. She needs to understand how much she hurt me. James. She gasped between sobs. I know I left you for someone terrible. Oh my goodness. She put her head down on the table and cried. This was her moment, so I just waited for her to calm down. Sitting there, I heard some pops. I turned to my left and saw Cyrus standing there. What the heck? I couldn't believe it. I jumped up to face him, ready to confront him. I took 2 steps and he pulled a gun on me. Really? Again? What did I ever do to you, Cyrus? I thought we were supposed to be friends, but I guess I was wrong. This was the 2nd time you've come at me like this. The gun looked much bigger than the last one. I didn't think I would get lucky this time. James! James! Oh, you poor guy. You really don't know anything, do you? I just stared at him, confused about what he meant. What are you talking about? He smiled and looked very pleased with himself. Luckily, I had a few friends who showed up, and Sean was next to him. He pointed the gun at Cyrus's head and told him to put down his weapon. Sorry, I'm late. I saw that guy sneaking up on you, and I thought something bad was going to happen. Cyrus growled, but did what he was told. He looked at me again, and his face was full of anger when he spoke next. Okay, my mother was seeing someone else, and my father found out. Guess who the guy was? Timothy Holmes. If my face showed even a bit of the shock I felt, it would have been enough. Yeah, your dad was with my mom. You always asked why they got divorced, right? Well, now you know. I didn't learn about it right away, but when I did, I wanted revenge on you all. Are you saying that because my dad did something wrong, I deserved all the bad things you gave me? I thought you were my friend. He looked at me with clear hatred. I couldn't stand to see you so happy. Your parents were still together, and you had a nice family. I was unhappy. My parents never spoke to each other, and when they did, they fought. I can't forgive your family. I took revenge on your parents, and now I'm taking revenge on you. His words made my stomach hurt. Had he really just said he was part of my parents' accident? What did you just say? I growled. Cyrus had an angry grin, like he enjoyed sharing his dark secrets. You heard me. I messed up their car that night. The storm didn't happen on purpose, but it didn't matter in the end. I can't believe I let this happen, Caitlin said, shaking her head. Tears streamed down her red cheeks, and she looked sick. I'm done with this. I'm calling the police. You're going to jail, Cyrus! I yelled at him. I reached for my phone, and Cyrus raised his gun again. Then there was a loud bang. My ears rang like I had just left a concert. When I looked up, Cyrus was lying on the ground with blood coming from his head. I glanced at Sean and nodded. I felt a rush of adrenaline. I kicked his body in anger. It was the only way I could let out my frustration as my rage began to fade. I sat down on the bench next to Caitlin. It's finally over, I said. I think it's time to call the police, don't you? Both nodded, and I made the call. I explained everything, and they arrived quickly. It's not every day a shooting happens on this island. They took our statements and checked the area. Caitlin and I didn't have to wait long to be interviewed. We walked back to my boat at the dock. The officers told us to stay close until they finished their work. I was sure they would find Cyrus. What worried me most was if Sean would get into trouble. We walked to the deck, and I offered my ex-wife a drink. So, what happens now? Caitlin asked. We need to be better parents to our daughter, I replied. Other than that, there's no more USA for us, Kate. I'm sorry, but it's too late for us. She nodded slightly, her eyes glistening. You're right. I could have done things differently, but I have to live with my choices now. I really wish we could go back and try again, I said. I know, but that's not going to happen, Kate. I forgive you. Thanks, she said quietly. That's probably more than I deserve. After that, we didn't have much more to say. I told her she could sleep in an empty bunk, and as she left in the morning, I wished her a good life. I was just happy to be home and relieved that Cyrus wouldn't be around anymore. The talk with Caitlin was tough, but it helped me understand some things. I didn't feel better, but it seemed like the issues were settled after she left in a cab. Later, I got a call from my daughter. She sounded worried and was asking me questions fast. What's wrong? Are you okay? Mom called. Is she okay? Is she with you? I said, slow down, honey. Everything's fine now. I was safe after my plane crash. Mom is coming back to Virginia, and I'm okay. I heard a small sniffle on the other end. Are you okay? She asked. Yes, sweetie. I'm just really happy to be safe. Your friend Sean told me you were missing, and I was really worried. Mom wanted to know why I had to tell her. I'm sorry, Dad. It's all right, Maddie. I'm glad she came. We finally talked about everything we needed to get off our chests. Really? How did it go? She asked, her tone hopeful. I tried to reassure her gently. We talked about things, But it doesn't change what happened. We will both be there for you, no matter what. That's the most important thing, I said. We need to support each other. Okay. I just wished things could have turned out better, she replied. I took a deep breath and said, Maddie, I loved your mom very much, and you are a close second. She loved me too, but that wasn't enough. I can't change that. Just remember not to make the same mistakes we did. Always talk openly with the ones you care about, even when it's hard. And keep your promises. I try my best to keep my promises because that's what I expect from others. It's the golden rule, right? She said. I heard her sniffle again, so I decided to change the subject. All right, let's talk about you now. How's school going? How's Sarah? She laughed for a whole minute. That's my dad. He just came back from his accident and asks about my school and life. It's priceless. I chuckled along with her. I will always care about how you're doing. It's part of being a parent. But you still didn't answer my questions, did you? I asked. School is okay, Dad. We just started the semester, so we're doing a lot of the same old stuff. Sarah is doing well, too. We're living together now in an apartment near campus. Okay, call me if you need anything. I'll be stuck at home for a bit until my plane is fixed or I get a new one. Stay safe. I love you, Dad. I love you too, Maddie. With that, we hung up. I let out a big sigh and sat down at the kitchen table. This was the second toughest week of my life. Sure, we had good and bad times in our marriage, but nothing like this year. I quickly poured myself a drink, finished it, and went to rest in my bed. The next day, I called the police to ask about Sean, who had spent the night in jail. They couldn't share much, but said he might be charged or released that same day. In the end, the Maui County District Attorney chose not to charge him because everything lined up with the witnesses saying it was self-defense. Sean and I decided to celebrate his return that night by visiting our favorite beach spot and stumbling back to the boat. A week after he was released, I asked for help to recover my airplane and bring it back to our dock. Sean said he could fix most of the damage, but I needed to order a new window and some engine parts. I ordered the parts and stayed out of Sean's way while he worked. Howard came by, and we spent some evenings playing cards and having drinks. He asked how I was doing and mentioned that Tanya had been asking about me. She tried to call when I was away, but he didn't know where I was at the time. He suggested I should call her. It would be silly not to call her, so I did it right away. She was so relieved to hear I was okay and asked me to visit her in Los Angeles. After a short and happy chat, we hung up. I spent the rest of the day getting ready to fly to LA and even booked a hotel at the airport, just in case. I hoped she would let me stay with her while I was there. Sean told me he would have the plane ready by the time I got back, and that he and Tammy would work on getting our business back on track. I told them to make sure the plane was ready to go and fully prepared for anything. I wasn't going to be caught off guard like that again. They both dropped me off at the Honolulu airport and then took me to my boat on the island. I found it a bit funny, but I trusted them completely. I spent about an hour on the deck talking with April, Tammy's daughter. She was very curious, and I suggested that she should visit her mom at work more often. This made Tammy smile and playfully shake her finger at me. She was steering the boat while April came down to grab a snack. I moved closer to Tammy. I didn't get a chance to thank you for being here with me. It really matters to me when I have trustworthy people around. James, you gave us a chance to live in Hawaii away from my unfaithful husband. And you thank me? She replied, surprised. Yes, I am thanking you. You are ready to leave your daughter and move far from family and friends to be here. I'm happy it's helping you and that you're doing well. But I still want to say thank you, I insisted. Well, since you put it that way, you're welcome. Also, you should know that April has started calling you Uncle James. She really looks up to you, and I appreciate that. You are a good role model for her when she needs one. I'm just glad you're my friend. I patted her shoulder. I feel the same way. Let's plan to have a big meal when I get back. How does that sound? Yeah, that sounds great, she replied. I sat quietly during the short ride, just watching the waves and boats around me. They dropped me off, and I promised to call them later. I took a cab to the airport, and the flight left a few minutes early. Everything was starting to feel real. I wanted to make the most of my time. The flight landed almost 25 minutes ahead of schedule, thanks to a strong tailwind. It made the trip shorter. I didn't envy those big commercial pilots, even if their planes were more automated. Driving a big airplane seemed like driving a bus, while I loved the feel of smaller, more personal planes. Sure, flying small planes took more effort, but I felt much more alive in the air. As I got to baggage claim, I saw a big man with a sign that had my name on it. When I say big, I mean really big. He looked like a younger version of Hulk Hogan. I walked up and introduced myself. He waited while I got my bag and then guided me to the waiting limousine. He held the back door open for me and said, "Miss Pierce wanted to come for you, but she couldn't make it. I'll take you to her house now." The ride to her house took almost 40 minutes, but it was the most comfortable car ride I had ever experienced. The limousine had everything, including a full bar. I decided to enjoy one drink, a tasty bourbon whiskey from Indiana that I would want to remember. As we pulled up to her house, I felt excited about what was next. The car passed through a tall iron gate with sharp points on top. The surrounding wall was 10 feet high and looked like it had barbed wire on the top. The wall stretched far on both sides of the gate and connected to another wall, likely from a neighbor. As soon as the driver parked, we entered a long, winding driveway filled with beautiful plants and trees I had never seen before. When we reached the house, I got out, feeling amazed. The front entrance was huge with big columns on either side. I couldn't even call it a door. It was enormous. 2 dark wood doors with shiny black metal designs. It felt more like a castle than a house. The giant doors opened and Tanya appeared. She wore tight jeans and a casual t-shirt. She came down the steps and hugged me tightly. "I'm so glad you're here," she said with joy. "It's good to see you too." I smiled as she hugged me even tighter before letting go. She took my hand and led me inside, not giving me a chance to worry about my bags. I thought I saw someone take them from the driver before we entered the house. Inside was a really big room, which made sense for such a large house. In the center stood a lovely wooden staircase with carvings and red carpet on the steps. She turned to me and stepped closer to embrace me again. Her lips brushed against mine, and the kiss felt filled with warmth. She gently held the back of my neck and played with my hair. It surprised me when I thought I tasted cherries. For a moment, our tongues danced together, and it felt like it lasted forever before we pulled apart, both a little breathless. Tanya looked at me with a spark in her eyes. "I've been looking forward to this," she said softly. I was taken aback. I felt a strong connection with her before, but this moment was something else. "Welcome to my home," she continued, as she led me through the big kitchen to the back patio. This wasn't just any patio. She had a large pool, a hot tub, a small bar area, and what looked like a guest house. Beyond the patio, the yard was so big it could easily fit a golf course. Tall trees lined the edges, creating a natural barrier around this beautiful area. The pathways seemed to go on forever, and a gazebo was visible at the back of the yard. The whole scene looked like something from a story. I might not have been on the islands anymore, but it still felt like a carefree time. I was determined to enjoy this vacation and my moments with Tanya. She led me to a table with an umbrella and some chairs by the pool. As I sat down, a woman who seemed a bit older walked over. "James, this is Edith. She's not a maid, but she helps me. She treats me like one of her daughters, so she's like a second mom to me." "Hi, Edith. It's nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you, too. Can I get you both something to drink?" she asked with a friendly smile. "I'd love some ice water," I said, since it was warm outside and I was feeling a bit thirsty. "Could you bring me a glass of iced tea?" Tanya asked. "Sure, I'll be right back," Edith replied and went into the kitchen. "So, how was it coming back from the islands?" Edith asked me. "It's strange. I wanted to visit you, but I got used to the slow pace of the islands. It will take some time to adjust to the busy city again." "You're in the right place then. I know the city can be hectic, but my home is a nice escape from all that," she said with a playful smile. We sat on her patio, enjoyed our drinks, and talked about what we had been up to since her visit to Hawaii. She shared that she had a new movie starting in a couple of weeks and was getting ready for it. She had the script and was reading it again. She also mentioned a script she received from a director she didn't know and asked for my opinion on it. Most of what she said didn't make much sense to me since I wasn't familiar with Hollywood. Still, I was glad to hear about her success. After a while, she suggested we go out for dinner. She recommended a place she had been to before and hoped I would like it. She said it was called Providence's and was on Melrose Avenue. I hadn't been to that part of the city before, so I trusted her word. I was just excited to spend time with her. I put on my only pair of khakis and a light blue shirt I had brought for the trip. I waited for her in the main lobby, and it felt like it was taking a long time. I knew how some women could be, so I waited patiently. Edith offered me a drink, and I happily accepted a glass of Scotch whiskey, which she called her simple drink. She mentioned she had a nicer bottle hidden somewhere in her office. I heard some noise at the top of the stairs and looked up to see Tanya coming down. She looked beautiful, like a shining angel. "So what do you think?" she asked, sounding a bit unsure. "I think it's a silly question. You look amazing," I replied. I really meant it. I was truly impressed by her beauty. The same limo was waiting to pick us up outside. I took her hand, and we walked out together. The driver opened the door for her, and I helped her inside. I sat down next to her, and within moments we were on our way. As we drove, we each enjoyed a glass of fruity white wine and talked about our plans for after dinner. I knew what I wanted to do, and I hoped she felt the same. When we arrived, the valet opened the door for us. The restaurants outside looked nice, but not too special for a fancy seafood place. As soon as she stepped out, a group of photographers rushed over, asking her all kinds of questions. "Who is Tanya? Are you seeing someone new? Can you tell us about your latest movie? What happened with Tyler? Is he your new boyfriend?" There were many shouted questions, but they all started to mix together for me. I took her hand and walked her into the restaurant. The hostess guided us to the main dining area. I was impressed by the space and elegance inside, as well as how much care was put into everything. We sat at a corner table on the top floor, which gave us a great view of the whole place. "I'm sorry about the photographers. They never give up," I said with a smile. "That's okay. It feels nice to be noticed for a moment." "So they think I'm your boyfriend now?" I joked. "And who's Tyler?" "Tyler was my boyfriend last year, but we broke up a few months ago. We decided to end it quietly since we didn't have much in common and couldn't talk well. Now you can see why, right?" I thought about it and realized I didn't really mind her past. We both had one, and I was ready to move forward. "Well, you're going to be in the spotlight soon, right? The guy who dated Tanya sounds like a cool title," I said. Her voice was light, but I could tell she was a bit worried about how I would feel. "Tanya, I didn't come here to be famous. I don't want to be known just as that guy, although I do like dating you," I replied with a smile. I reached for her hand at the table. "I came here to enjoy spending time with you and hopefully to reconnect with what I think started on the beach." She smiled back and gripped my hand tightly. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear. So changing the subject, how long will you be in town?" "I plan to stay for about a week. It depends on a few things, but mostly I hope we can get to know each other better, and you can show me around like you promised." She grinned, remembering the promise. "All right then. Starting tomorrow, we'll visit some of my favorite places in the city, plus some hidden gems. I have my secrets too." Her playful smile made me wonder if she was just teasing me or if she really liked to have fun. I believe both ideas can be true. We enjoyed a lovely dinner date until it was time to go. This place was not one where you worried about splitting the bill. The menu had only a few prices, mainly for special dishes. Tanya just told the waiter to add it to our bill and she would pay later. I was starting to wonder if you could even leave cash as a tip here. I asked, "Should we leave a tip on the table?" We both smiled at that. She opened her purse, took out a $100 bill, and placed it between the water glasses. "Is that enough?" she asked with a giggle. I nodded and we stood up to leave. The waiter ran ahead to the parking lot, and by the time we got there, our limo was waiting for us. The paparazzi were still outside, shouting questions, but we ignored them and got into the back seat. We took a short drive to her house. When we arrived, she playfully jumped on me right in the entrance. "Let's go upstairs." I could tell she really meant it, so I just nodded and followed her up to the bedroom. The next day, we didn't leave the bedroom until almost noon because we got hungry. We had lunch and then spent the afternoon driving around the area in her Honda S2000. She could buy a fancier car, but she liked the way this one looked. Those were her words. She showed me her favorite sites, starting with the Getty Center. I loved the gardens and exhibits there. It was a wonderful day with her. Then she took me to the Vintage Car Museum, where we saw amazing cars. She ended our tour with a visit to Griffith Park. Later, we had dinner at a nice restaurant, though I couldn't pronounce its name at all. Afterward, we went to a nightclub called Lure. This place was packed, and her fame made sure we got in, but it also meant many people wanted to talk to her. I got us drinks, but she was soon pulled away to dance with someone who looked like a Ken doll. I felt a little jealous, but not too much. I found a small table for two and waited for her to come back. After a couple of fast songs with loud beats, she returned. I handed her a drink and we laughed, realizing we couldn't hear each other. She pointed to the patio and stood up. I followed her outside, enjoying the warm night air and the stars above. "It's usually like this out here, right?" I said. "At least this view is special, isn't it?" The stars were beautiful, and we could hear laughter from nearby couples and a group of friends. Overall, it was a nice atmosphere. "James, I want to visit you again soon," she said. "I have a few scenes to film in the next 2 weeks, but I'd really like to come and see you when I'm done. I think that would be nice." I smiled at the idea. We spent another hour at the club, had some drinks, and danced. Yes, I finally got up and danced with her. The club was busy, and we felt relieved when we left. I thought the fast beats from the club were exciting, even if they weren't really my style. My vacation ended 2 days later after soaking up as much sun in LA as I could. I wished I could have spent more time on her back porch, but we both had our own lives. I was tired too. At 42, I felt my age. Sure, I could still keep up, but how long would that last? On the way back, I had to be honest with myself. Tanya was young and full of energy, both in life and in her work. Could I keep up with her? Should I even think of her as my girlfriend? I decided to push those thoughts aside for now. When I got home, I found out that Sean had ordered a few more parts and wouldn't finish the airplane for at least another week. I told him to keep going and decided to take a little boat ride. I spoke to Howard and arranged for Sean to stay with him for a few nights. I left the cove, drove along the coast, and found a nice spot. The bay was just a quiet beach with no houses nearby. I dropped anchor and relaxed on the deck. I thought about Caitlin. I thought about Tanya. I even thought about Kim, the young concierge. Eventually, I went downstairs and had a light salad for dinner. I slept well, not noticing the sounds of the big city around me. The waves made me feel calm, and when I woke up, I felt refreshed. It was time to start the day. By starting the day, I meant I wouldn't just lay in the sun. I figured I might roll over to get more sun. Just as I was about to roll, I heard an airplane passing by. It wasn't too close, but it still reminded me of flying. I missed being in control of a plane and didn't like waiting for my plane to be fixed. Sitting on the deck, I thought about my time alone on the island. This may not be movie material, but maybe I could write a short story about it. Would anyone want to read it? It would help me to write down everything that happened. Honestly, I didn't mind if no one ever read it. I would think of it as a way to sort through my thoughts during those long days. I got out a notepad and pen and started writing. After an hour, my hands were tired, and I realized I didn't know how much I had written. I had a sandwich for lunch and enjoyed one of my beach drinks, which I missed while in LA, before going back out on the deck. I began writing again until the sun began to set, and I enjoyed 3 drinks during the evening. My writing looked a bit messy, so I stopped. My hand started to hurt, and I had to put ice on it. I hadn't written like that in a long time, probably since college. The next day felt similar. I didn't write with the same excitement. My hands still felt sore from the day before. I went back to the marina and joined Sean and Howard for a nice dinner, followed by too many drinks. I really need to watch Howard more closely. The way he drinks, he could have serious health problems. Maybe that's what he wants. The next day, I got a call from Tanya. "Hi, James. I just wanted to tell you that filming for the movie has been delayed. I won't be able to come for another 2 weeks. I'm sorry." I could hear sadness in her voice. I didn't want to upset her. "Don't worry, you can still come. Just let me know when—" "Okay? Sure. Okay, I'll see you then," I said as we hung up. I was starting to really like her. How could this happen? She's a famous actress. What am I supposed to do when I'm with her? I thought about this all night until I fell asleep. The next day, Sean told me that the parts he needed were still on the way. Then I had an idea. Maybe I could try to fit in more with her lifestyle. I asked Sean if he wanted to drive to LA with me since we were just waiting. He agreed. That's a great idea. I really needed a break from this place. The next day, we were already on the plane heading to LA. I didn't really like the big city, but I was starting to care about this woman, and I wanted to do anything for her. We rented a car, and I booked a hotel room for Sean near her home, just in case she didn't want him in the guest room. I hoped our surprise visit would make her happy. When we arrived at her house, Sean whistled. The gate was open, and there were several cars in the driveway. I wondered if she was hosting a party, which could be fun. I parked the car, and we walked to the door. I rang the doorbell, and someone soon opened the door. It turned out to be Skip Cruz, another popular actor. I couldn't help but chuckle at his name. He seemed a bit tipsy, but at least he smiled at us. "Hey, guys. Did you come to the party too?" he asked. "Yeah, I'm a friend of Tanya's," I replied. "Have you seen her?" "Yeah, she's right over there," he said, and led us into the house and out to the back patio. Tanya was sitting in one of the lounge chairs with her ex beside her. In that moment, I realized things with her might not be as simple as I thought. It was a tough moment, but I guess I should have expected it. He walked us over and said, "Hey babe, this guy says he's your friend." Tanya opened her eyes and gasped, "James, oh my God. What are you doing here? I thought you were still in Hawaii." She jumped up, grabbed a towel, and ran into the house. "What's wrong, babe?" Tyler asked. I looked at Sean and said, "Let's go." I think showing up like this was a mistake. I turned to Tyler and said, "She's all yours, man." Just as we were leaving her house, she ran out in her robe. "James, wait." I stopped in front of the rental car and turned around. "Tanya, you don't need to explain anything to me. I should have known." "James, things aren't what they seem." "Tyler, he's an ex-boyfriend who just shows up sometimes. Nothing happened. Then what happened to your clothes? And why was he only in his boxers?" After a moment of awkward silence, I thought so. "Tanya, I was grateful to have met you. I hope you find happiness here. Please, James, can't we just talk about this? I don't want things to end this way. I really like you." Sean got in the car and I opened my door. "No, I think we've said enough. I really like you too, but I can't be with someone who is not honest. You said you were busy with work and you didn't tell me your ex was around. That would have saved me the trip. Goodbye, Tanya." With those words, I got into the car. She stood there crying, but I'm not sure she knew why. Maybe it was a reaction to losing something she valued. I was hurt by her dishonesty, but I had to remind myself that we weren't married. I just thought we were exclusive, and everyone knows about making assumptions. They can lead to misunderstandings. Anyway, we went back to the hotel for the night and returned to Molokai the next day. She sent me several text messages and one voice message, all of which I deleted. It was time to move on and enjoy my life in Hawaii again. I felt sad that our short romance was over, but at the same time I was relieved I hadn't gotten more involved before knowing the truth. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.